Templar, bro. If they add in Templar, bro, like, imagine I could go be me and McConnell. We could go and do a fucking see if he wants to do a level.
Now.
Like I'm Warrior.
Hello, everybody.
So
He's
Templar,
here we are.
dude. That would be
just
wild.
Real quick, now that we have the audience here, I'm
Okay,
going to
here we
have Jonathan one more time say something real quick, just to make sure they can hear us well, and we'll get feedback from the chat.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Rogers, game director on Path of Exile 2.
Thanks, sir. Mark.
He said that.
Hi,
so many
I'm Mark.
times.
Hello, this is me speaking, and I didn't want to say the same thing he said.
It's fine, you can.
All right, and then lovely co-host Ghazi here.
Lovely co-host. Mic check. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Excellent. So with that being said, Ghazi, why don't you take it away with the intros?
Hi, welcome to Tavern Talk episode. We still have no idea what episode we're on, and we're going to keep up with that trend. We have with us my lovely co-host, Darth Microtransaction, and the lovely two individuals that is basically the OGs at this point. We got Mark and Jonathan from Path of Exile 2 Grinding Gear Games. How are you guys doing?
Oh, doing great. I mean, you know, like it's really good to get back into things again. We had a good break, you know, like, and yeah, I don't know. It's just nice to be back and actually looking at the problems again. As much as, you know, it can be painful sometimes, but yeah, no, it's real good to get back into things.
Yeah, disconnected for a little bit. Not too long, but just a little bit, and now back, which is awesome. But no, it was a long burn last year, so it was good to get a little bit of a break over that Christmas. But yeah, lots to address, lots to change. Excited.
And it seems like with the break, you guys still managed to get a lot of changes in from the review video we saw. It's fairly substantial, so that's exciting.
I mean, that is for the most part just stuff that we did, like, you know, last week and this week. The maps, the extra 4 maps, some of those did have some work that was done a little earlier, but for them because we knew we needed more towers and we just didn't get them in. But pretty much all that stuff is just stuff that we're, you know, just doing last week and this week. Like we try to move, you know, fairly quickly when we can.
So they just made
the thing now is of course going to be like one issue we kind of realized we had is like, okay, how much do we concentrate on fixing problems people have right now, and how much do we concentrate on like the next big kind of content patch? And so that's like kind of the tricky thing we have to maneuver around at the moment. And I guess my feeling is that so long as there's like big problems that are causing people to have you know, like a bad experience, I kind of want to make sure that those get addressed as soon as possible, at least where we can, so that we're making sure that things are in as best a state we like some kind of point of stability, so that we can concentrate on having the larger kind of like content patch after that.
That's great to hear. So for this episode or this interview or whatever we're going to call it, we've done what we can to make sure that we let the community get their voices heard. So most of the questions we're going to go through is questions collected almost exclusively from the community. We have a couple of light for some reason questions and some warrior questions from Darth, and we have some minion questions as expected from my side of things. But most of the questions will be taken from the actual community. So I'm just going to kick us off so don't waste anyone's time. And we're going to start with a question saying, which of the changes that has been showcased was the team most excited to be able to announce?
Well, I guess that I'd say that like these changes, obviously, while the players are happy with them, we're not exactly excited about them per se, because these are just like fixes to things that are problems, right? So the stuff that we're excited about is the stuff we're not talking about, which is the content that's coming up in the in the larger one that'll have an economy reset and so on. There's obviously a lot of stuff there, but for this stuff, it's just like really like, okay, what can we do to make sure that people are having a good time? That's kind of the main thing I would say.
Which is exciting in its own. To see how much more we can improve how many people having a good time.
So I mean, that's good, but yeah, really it's like there's no one thing there where like, oh yeah, this is the amazing thing. It's like it's all just like, let's make the game not suck. That's kind of our main goal.
So one of the changes for in-game maps is the changes to, you mentioned monsters, chests, rare monsters. What impact are you guys hoping that this change specifically is going to have in in-game mapping?
To where it doesn't suck.
Well, I want this. Well, there's a couple things. It is just a general, probably 30% more kind of monsters, items, etc. from inherent maps.
Yeah, there you go.
You get the thing where now the inherent map is higher value, and thus proportionately the league is less impactful. Say Breach, which is obviously in its own universe of craziness right now.
Yeah, it's too good.
But the idea is the base map is more rewarding, and thus adding the extra content is less necessary for, say, map sustain. The other thing is it will interact with different rolled maps differently. So we tried to do this better before early access began, but again, it should be now certain maps and certain mods that increase the chests, the rarity of chests, the rarity of monsters will have different benefits.
That's
so
the fun part.
That's kind of cool that I want people to learn that over time and see what's beneficial, what multiplies better, and then you combine those things where you have this map's better for number of monsters, whereas this map's worse for number of monsters because they're multipliers. So like a really small map versus a really large map, actually before they were relatively consistent. Now that large map might have twice as many monsters as that small map.
That's what I want to see.
But it has the same density of monsters. So you don't just have big open empty spaces of nothing. So obviously now the number of packs, if you multiply that up, it has a much grander effect on the big map than it does the small map.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But the small map is obviously easier to clear, faster to clear. So say if you're optimizing for bossing, you're probably going to try and have be applying more bosses to small maps using the new tablet. Or if you're doing leagues that, more like Breach, you might want smaller maps that way because you're focusing on just farming breaches as opposed to, say, Delirium. Or say Expedition favors, that doesn't really care if the map is large or small. So, having those different kind of axes is really interesting where you are thinking about that as you go. Now, people have to learn that, and that's cool. I actually want people to learn that and kind of post all their details on, like, this map's really good and this map isn't. And we've accounted for layouts, how fast they are to clear, all of that stuff. So certain maps that were more tedious to clear now have pretty drastic advantages on at least one or two different axes. So they might have a higher number of minimum monsters, rare monsters, higher spawn rate of rare monsters, magic monsters, rare chests, who knows.
And there was a lot of that balance that you couldn't really do until you actually had experience playing them, right? Because it's hard to tell when you're just in development and you're not on a real character. Like, is this map actually fun or not, right? The end game is we've got the least amount of testing, so it really did require, like, okay, some actual proper play and be like, okay, is this map, to really answer the question of is this map good or not? So now when we see that, then we can be like, okay, we need to make this change or that change.
I just need more stuff in them.
There's just been a lot of just like sanding off all the rough edges that in-game had by virtue of the fact that it just really wasn't as tested as what the campaign was. Go on.
That all being said, I'd say one thing it has introduced is it has added more bad luck or mistake protection to some degree, because if you would like fully juice a really small bad map, that minimum of bad is now much higher. And so, like, you all of a sudden now have invested all this wealth into this bad map. You've run it, and you're like, "What the? I didn't get anything back from it." So, the minimum is certainly now much better, which should hopefully protect a lot of people who are falling out of map sustain. Whereas, like, a lot of the good players who are a bit more observant, a bit more familiar with PoE1, were just like happily sustaining maps. And so, you had these two ends of spectrum, and hopefully, we've raised the minimum now with these changes.
So 2 follow-up questions. Since this was a question for later, but since we're talking about bad maps in particular, something you mentioned here, what is your guys' opinion on the current state of maps in the game? Not so much from a monster point of view, but of a layout of maps. So there are some maps people don't like as much. There are ones people really do like as much. Is your opinion that you need maps, for instance, like Mire, Augury, Vow Factory? These are some of the least favorable maps. People hate those. Do you think you need maps like this in the game in order to more appreciate the more common ones people enjoy? Or what's your stance currently on the map amount of variety disparity in the game, put it that way?
I guess ideally, like, if so I mean, there have been a few adjustments to things like that. Probably not, like, we're not necessarily going to take every map people find annoying and change it, like, so that people don't in that way. But certainly there should be balance changes to make it so that they feel at least worthwhile, even if they do have a more annoying layout or something like that. So I mean, I assume you feel the same way about that.
There's some standout things. Like, obviously, you shouldn't have the levers that you just can't dodge roll out of and you just die, or the levers are just spawning burning ground on them, right? Obviously, this stuff is just objectively wrong and objectively bad, and that will be fixed. But a lot of that contributes to, like, this is the worst map because you'll go pull a lever and die while doing so.
Yes.
And then there's the ones that, are just, like, inherently worse layouts, especially for certain builds. But then
that's how it is.
Again, now using this other thing where it's like, actually, well, those maps may now spawn the most amount of rare monsters or the most magic monsters or just the most amount of monsters. You're going to have to go figure some of that stuff out. And some people might like that. People with less, screen clearing AoE centric builds probably don't mind some indoor, more mazy maps if they're going to get the benefit or feel like they're getting the benefit from, more rare monsters, they've got, I don't know, more single target or a more concentrated DPS or whatever. They don't feel so bad now for running that as opposed to just running
hallways.
It's
a dead end.
Sand spit where you can just like nuke entire screens every 2 seconds.
The bad case of this though is definitely the tower map, because it was kind of like you mandatorily have to run that map. And so having that be not great is like not a good situation. So, hopefully we've addressed that one. Like that was really urgent to address, because it's like, because it's mandatory, right? You can't just skip it.
So annoying.
So that one had to be sorted.
Yeah, turns out it's maybe not a good thing where you have to approach a room full of monsters that you don't know what they are and they're super dangerous and you can't see them and it's a narrow bottleneck and you have to run in and just die.
But even so, like obviously the variety helps with that, but also the new version of that map is now based on the top floor tile set, which has like got more variety and like it's easier to deal with. So that should improve a lot of that.
Bit of visibility.
Yeah, exactly. So it
more
helps
open,
a lot.
less tight bottlenecks. Still they're still relatively narrow here and there, but much better to clear.
Mm-hmm. So one more follow-up here, and I'll pass it off to Ghazi. In the reveal, you mentioned that the boss maps, for instance, were supposed to be more common than they actually were.
I think every map should have a boss.
This comes to a very common question about Waystones Sustain.
Every map should have a boss.
What was your opinion on the state that previously was with Waystones Sustain, as well as do you believe this impact of additional bosses
are the best part of the game?
Waystones Sustain, so you think this is going to help alleviate some of the feedback we've seen related to there?
That one's pretty interesting because, and this is probably going to be a controversial thing to say, but like we don't know that there necessarily is a problem with Waystone Sustain as such. So that means we have to look into, if people say that there is, then that means we have to understand why that is, because I don't think that's the experience that like we're having.
He's right.
As we're playing
it's
ourselves.
The cascading
so there's always
systems.
this thing where it's like we want to hear what the players say, but then we always want to confirm with our own experience that like when we do what they're doing, that we're getting the same experience before we can kind of make a good decision about what a change would be. So I don't know that we've identified why it is yet that players are having problems with Waystone Sustain, and so that's like, and this will change this obviously because there's more bosses and so on. Like that's the thing you can do, and killing bosses will give you upgrades and so on. Like that'll help with that. But I guess I sort of like I feel like we need to understand that problem more before we can really work out what exactly needs to happen with it.
There's certainly more to learn there, but as I said before, the minimum's now higher for sure.
Right. Yeah. So it can be just people running into bad specific maps that like have specific problems that someone who's.
I suspect it's also just a lot of people struggling with the difficulty in dying.
Yeah.
And like it's obviously very different if you're dying even in 30% of your maps, 20% of your maps.
Exactly.
I mean, even 10% of your maps. It can make that difference. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's definitely 100% more to look into there. But like, I personally, I went to from tier 1 to tier 15 maps in a total of 32 maps, and I've sustained since. And then you see the things where people are talking about map sustain, and I'm like, okay, am I in a different universe? And the answer is probably
in a different universe.
The answer is probably yes, I am in a different universe. But from a purely anecdotal standpopoint of my own, I try. I'm going to see how it is for myself, and I'm somewhere else. We need to look more into this somewhere. So we have other people at the office as well, of course, and you get their anecdotal experience. But we need to look at this from a much broader perspective. But either way, what we've just put forward is an improvement to all of that. Higher maximum, sure, higher minimum, and a bit more safety for bad luck. But what it doesn't really account for right now is safety for people dying and, failing 50% of their maps or N% of their maps.
So there is a slightly more subtle thing going on, I think, which... It's kind of unfortunate how this turned out, but effectively, because you can power through the map tiers really fast, it means that you don't get a chance to find the gear that you would otherwise have as you went through those tiers. And that means that effectively when you do, like you might be playing higher tier maps than what you really should be playing for the amount of wealth that you've found. And that means that your map sustain is bad because you're dying more often because you're kind of playing higher tier content. And that's is on us because we need to adjust that so that you you only start effectively, in order to progress up the tiers, it needs to be more that we need to sort of gear check you more as you go up a little bit to make sure that you've got the gear you need before you're going up the tiers.
Yeah, I think he's
right. This is going to be a really subtle and tricky thing to get exactly right. Like, there's quite a lot to that.
The problem,
and
I
that's
think,
kind
is
of more of a
boss
thing
map
that we can
drops.
sort of look at over a bit of a longer period of time because it's going to require some adjustments.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, that's just sort of another one. But there's quite a lot of implications to all of that, and I don't know that we're quite ready to understand exactly what would need to happen for that to happen. But that is kind of one of the issues that we're seeing is just effectively people playing content that's harder than what we would hope they would be playing for the gear that they have, which then causes the deaths, which causes the sustain to be bad.
Yep.
So that's kind of that issue there.
Thanks for the detailed answer. I'll throw it off to Ghazi for the next questioner.
Yeah, next in line, we're actually going to circle back to what you mentioned, Mark, regarding Expedition, not caring about the layout and whatnot. But you also mentioned, I believe it was in the video, right? You mentioned more substantial changes to Expedition coming later. So the question is, do you have any particular examples of these things you're hoping to accomplish with this mechanic?
That's why Elon died? Really?
Yeah, I can't really say what it is, but what I can say is it is intended that every league... Sort of. I'd say without promising it, because we're allowed to make exceptions. It is kind of intended that every league provides some sort of access of character or crafting power that is abnormal. And so,
different that you can't get anywhere
different.
else.
Mostly character power here. So aside from the unique items, obviously they can or sometimes don't provide character power that can be attained elsewhere. This is more about something else that's, similar to, say, the instilling your amulet with a notable, it's something that only that provides. It gives you more power than you would have had if you had never done it. And so ideally, every league would kind of do something like that, or provide a crafting avenue that would then give you something like that, or give you more power in general. But yeah, we just kind of have the vendor mechanic where you can do some crafts, and none of those crafts are abnormal. They're not adding extra benefits or mods or anything outside of that. So yeah, we have intention to add something to that, and probably to a lot more of them over time. And as you get new ones that each obviously have this thing in mind, where we're trying to say, how can we make characters feel a little bit more powerful by engaging in that content? But yeah, Expedition just didn't quite get it when we ported it over. We discussed heaps of things, like we could add some more ROG crafts, so to speak, now that, even though it's now 3 out of 4 of them crafts.
It definitely needs something else, for sure.
It just needs something cool, something better, and something not rushed. Which is we're in a position where we're going to rush something, and it's like, hold on, let's not do that. Let's get it right and do it a bit later.
I feel like Gwynen's kind of redundant now.
I like that take.
Personally,
another question we have is regarding the Arbiter of Ash now having 6 resurrection or revive attempts.
This question's from Elon Musk.
Other attempts to, or adding other attempts to other pinnacles over time. I guess the question comes down to, why wait with adding extra attempts?
Ultimately, the reason is just time. So it might even be that in the patch that we do deliver, that some of those other ones are already done. It's just that because the video had to be made last week, and we were like, are we gonna, we knew we would get time to sort out the Arbiter, and we were like, we don't know if we're gonna get time to do the others, so we'll just promise that one, and then if the others come, then that's just a bonus. But effectively, there's a little bit of trickiness around each one to just work out all the states of everything. If you're looking at just as a random example, and this isn't obviously that big of a deal, but it's just, someone has to do it, is for the breach one, for example, we have to decide okay, so we can't really let you have the economy, you can't reset the whole map, because then you get the drops from the breach a second time. So then it's okay, we have to make sure we put a checkpoint in the thing, and that means we have to do someone has to go write some code to make the breach thing work correctly for checkpoints, and it's just random stuff like that. Just little details that just mean that it'll take a little bit longer to do those other ones. But I mean, we're not talking a really long time, right? We're just someone will get to it in the next couple of weeks. It's just,
I'd say King in the Mist. King in the Mist will almost certainly be done, because it's an isolated boss fight in a room with nothing else going on. Yeah. But for the logbook and for the breach one, you have to have some manual intervention, and we have to really make sure that there's none of that
map respawn.
Respawn at checkpoint at this exact point in time, and all of a sudden you get the loot again kind of thing going on, because. Yeah, that obviously can be quite destructive.
So yeah, it's literally just a time thing. We'll, as I said, we'll do it in the next couple of weeks, just as we, get these things going.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Speaking of Arbiter, a couple questions related to Citadels here, just some fast ones. Are Copper Citadels really the same spawn rate as all the others? That's what happened?
I mean, we generated a bunch of Atlas state and checked that they were equivalent. I mean, I don't know what to we really were not intending to make a Monopoly game, McDonald's Monopoly game style thing here. It really was intended to be equal. So yeah, as far as we could tell, it was just the just that the boss had that exploding minion thing. That was the damage just busted on that?
Nah, well. Maybe, but all of his little attached zombies, during the phase 1 of the fight, they, when he summons the sandstorm and you get protected, and you have the zombies coming at you, they blow up after they die. And in the map version, the in-game version of this fight, some logic was missing. I don't know what happened, and those would then explode at the end of the phase 2. So you're like, oh, I killed him. You run in to get your loot, and 8 zombies just explode and insta-kill you.
This is the bug.
And so what you found is a whole bunch of people were just straight up, succeeding at the fight and then just dying straight afterwards. So that accounted for some portion of it, and then he was just harder. Like certainly the death rate, even excluding the one-shotting zombies, was just much higher than the other two. But yeah, we have now a cheat that generates or simulates generating like, I think it's 1 billion different blocks and calculates how many of every map spawned and everything like that, just to test this specific Citadel case. And yeah, everything we could find generates exactly the correct amount of the 3 things. So
speaking
the
of
3 Citadels.
Speaking of spawning Citadels, did you guys happen to catch any of the conspiracy theories related to, corpses pointing in directions, etc.?
Oh, so ridiculous. Whatever. People come up with crazy things. I don't know.
I thought.
All right.
I can tell you. See, the thing is, I'm tempted to actually do something weird like that now, just to just to bait the conspiracies. But yeah, no, there was nothing weird going on.
It's just RNG. Like you have to. I did catch
it's
in the
just
video.
RNG. That's all it is.
It said closer to the cinders, so there is something to being farther away from your spawn point.
So, but basically, all that is literally just that there, where you start, there's just a radius you have to get to before they start spawning. But after that point, it's just they just spawn the same rate.
RNG.
And we just moved it closer just because since you can't really tell like where the like. That's like not obvious, right? And the main thing we want to do there is just not have a Citadel spawn like right next to where you start, because that'd be ridiculous. Yeah. Effectively we just shrunk that down a bit because it was a little bit large. And then the other thing as well is that now that you can see them in the fog, it actually makes them so much easier to find. That we actually intended, we were like, oh yeah, we're going to totally buff the number of these that there are. But after we made the change to seeing them in the fog, it was immediately like, oh shit, there's actually tons of these everywhere. We just weren't seeing them before. Seeing them makes a big difference.
Okay, so moving on off the top of Arbiter instead of those here. It mentioned in the video less bad mods on mobs. Can we get some more detail?
Sorry, it wasn't mobs. That I think it was in the item section, and maybe you misheard that slightly. But the bad mods thing was talking about items. So effectively, there's some stuff going on here. So effectively, what we did, because a lot of people were talking about issues with higher tier rares as you get to harder content, and effectively, when we sort of looked into this, we sort of worked out like. There were some anomalies around like what happens when mods get cut out in the lower levels, just based on kind of like somewhat random things about like how many top tier mods there are of certain types and things like that. So what we've done is it's not like huge changes, but we've kind of effectively done things like I think accuracy went down a little bit, and there was like I can't remember the other changes.
Accuracy went down, life on kill, mana on kill on weapons at least, and then. Attributes on hybrid gear.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the hybrid gear attributes, and then there was also the bug where effectively high tier rares weren't getting the ability to generate top T1 mods of certain types, which I don't think was actually necessarily as big of a deal as what people might have assumed, but because it wouldn't have affected that many items. But we have fixed it. So, for example, it was just impossible on a T5 bow to ever get attack speed.
Once it was a certain item,
once it was a certain item, but you couldn't even get T5 realistically except from high level stuff, right? You still could occasionally, but whatever. The point is like there was a few things like that were going on, and we effectively just adjusted that stuff, and it should result in generally better pairs when you're talking about like high end, like high tier stuff. So we'll just sort of see how that works out. The adjustments are not like mega, but they are there, and they should sort of improve things, I think, a little bit.
And just for clarity's sake, for the viewers, when you say top tier, like tier 1, you actually mean like tier 12 or whatever the top tier is, right? Because tier 1 technically is the worst.
Sorry, yeah, it's so annoying that we have like tiers going in reverse.
Yeah, it is really annoying, isn't it, Jonathan?
But yes, what I mean is whatever the top tier of that mod is. In some cases, it was getting cut out. In fact, I worry that even in the article that we're going to say that's actually incorrect. So I just need to fix that, because I think in the article that we posted, it says T1. Item affixes, which is actually backwards, so I need to go and fix that after we've done this.
We also need to make this consistent everywhere and sort this situation out.
Yeah,
I do have a follow-up on that.
Yeah,
it is sometimes very frustrating dropping something that has a high tier, but I don't know if that is the highest tier. Would it be possible? Like, is there something you guys are considering adding?
I think we are adding a thing that displays on the mod if it is the best tier. Relatively soon, but again, we need to also just figure out a little bit more around this, because we've got this whole T1 versus T random
the
number.
reason why there is resistance to having T1 mean the top one is because then if we add another one later, it changes what all the tiers are, and there was sort of some discomfort around that. But then maybe it's still better to just do that anyway.
It's better.
And like,
Please,
I don't know. That was the original thinking behind that. But
good thinking, logical.
Whatever. Like,
change it back.
It might be less confusing if
That's
T1 meant. No, because the other thing as well is that map tiers are like the T1 is the bottom one again, and you certainly wouldn't want to reverse that. That would be weird.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Like
Fair
probably.
enough.
Yeah, whatever. This is just a random small topic, but just one of those things.
No, I
speaking of items and quality, one of the most requested additions, item filters, come to console. So I'm sure many people are very excited about that.
That's
Speaking
for
of
the
topic of
cavemen.
consoles, can we expect more quality of life things coming to console? For instance,
the consoles have broadband yet?
Like text,
or do they still use dial-up?
Do you have any plans related to quality of life improvements for console?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly need to do more there. I mean, yeah, like I don't have any specific things to announce there, but effectively we need to make sure that that experience is good. And one thing that I know, this isn't actually technically a console thing, but another thing that we will be doing for people who use controller soon is like the ability to fast swap between controller and the PC UI just by like immediately in game, because that's something I believe there was even an implementation of that. It was just a little bit too dodgy to release on early access start. So we just need to get that sorted and then tested and sort of that. So that'll be another one. But in terms of just general console stuff, I mean, look, there's just more we can do, right? And you know, we've got our guys on console. They'll be looking into these things and just making changes. The text size one, I do think needs some addressing. It's a little bit tricky because there's kind of a lot of things all through the game that need like futzing around with. So that I definitely appreciate that. And like part of that is literally because when we're in this is kind of bad, but it's like in the studio, we literally have like a big screen and the couch that's near it is like relatively close. It's like an actual real world scenario. You know, people often sit a bit further away, and we probably should have been thinking about that. Yeah. Yeah, things like that just need some addressing for sure.
Fair enough.
All right. Putting aside bugs and tuning that is expected for early access state, what's a question that I was asking about? What are the players' feedback that surprised you guys the most?
How much they
I know
suck.
you were saying, I mean, I guess from my perspective, it's like we had a lot of worries about things being broken. We just didn't know what those things were going to be. But then you were saying before that just the level of brokenness did surprise you as far as like some character builds and stuff, right?
Yeah, like I had my whole like, okay.
Yeah, that monk thing was
obviously people are going to find
huh?
broken builds, but like we escaped millions into tens of millions, and then we escaped tens of millions into hundreds of millions in measuring in DPS, and then we escaped DPS into comets per second, and then like you got to this point where it's like, okay, we're just off the reservation here in terms of just, you know, when you 1 week in and someone's like, here's my 450 million DPS build that hits the pinnacle boss for 141 million damage and one shots in the 3-player party, and I'm like, oh, well, where are we? Like, what happened?
The thing that I found a little bit sad, and I guess we should have just expected this, is that like I sort of expected that the first few times people were playing the pinnacle boss, that would kind of be a normal fight. But in reality, the first few times people played the pinnacle boss was just completely like a disaster because like they just had some build that was because to get to the pinnacle boss the fastest, you also had to have like a ridiculously broken thing going on, and so you just ended up with just like like you don't even get to see the mechanics, and it was just like that was a bit sad to me. Well,
hopefully with more lives, people will actually be giving it a shot instead of just selling it off to those people who do one-shot it. But we'll see how that goes. But
the tricky thing about this has just been that, like, okay, so we do generally want to not do mid-league nerfs, and there was a period there before Christmas where we were making some changes, but we weren't even considering those to be mid-league nerfs because they still left things in a state that was still like very, very good. Like from our perspective, and like maybe the players would disagree with this, it was kind of like when we nerfed something there, we were still leaving it in a state where it's still some of the best shit ever. And so from our perspective, we were like, well, there'd be no reason to have to re-roll your character after this change because like it's still crazy. So we didn't even really consider those to be mid-league nerfs in the same way. But then, obviously, there's going to have to be some changes because, like, you know, there are just certain things that are just completely ridiculous. But one thing we've got now, and I kind of mentioned it in the video, is that, like, we actually have an understanding now of, like, what a character should look like. And so ideally, when we do our first, like, true balance patch, we should be at the point where we can be like, okay, here's like these like 10 things that need to come down, but then there's also like these other 50 things that need to come up to get to that point, right? So like ideally it sort of there should be a little bit of leveling there that occurs, but we really don't want to do that kind of patch without doing an economy reset because we actually need like to see what really happens when you get a new economy and all that sort of stuff. So, and when I say an economy reset, of course, what I mean is a new league. Like, you'll still have the old characters if you want to play them, but all the stuff we're going to be looking at will be on the new economy that, in terms of like how it evolves that way. So, that's going to be a tricky one. It'll take us a little bit longer. But that is also what we're working on in the background as well, is just like getting all of this stuff to where it needs to be.
So am I hearing that there's no nerfs coming in this patch then? Is that sort of what I'm taking from this?
There might be a few that relate to things that are just completely screwed. But it is not our intention to do a big nerf patch here. Like, that is not our goal. Our goal with this is like fix things that are annoying people and like make the game more playable. Whereas the goal of like the sort of balance patch that's coming a little later would be like, okay, we'll have a new economy. We'll actually do like a proper balance pass where we get all of that stuff like more.
Because you scared everyone with that executioner photo in the Twitter post. I mean, it looked like the guillotine was about to drop.
That's true.
Yeah, people look into things, I think, a little bit too much. Okay.
There's kind of three kinds of nerfs going on. Not on this patch. Just hold on.
I do want to follow up though with the comment on the balance patch coming later, and you want to combine that with a economy reset. So is that you saying that there will be economy resets during early access?
There has to be, right?
So there won't be. They'll be in a new league, so you still get to keep your old characters. But effectively, absolutely during early access there'll be new leagues. What I don't want to say is like whether or not the league so when I use the word league, people sort of assume that means there's like a league mechanic that comes along with it, and we might do that or we might not. We kind of need to work out what's going on there, but it'll be a new league in the sense that it's a new economy that people can play through, and we'll be introducing significant stuff that would want people to make people replay as well, as doing all the balance stuff and all that sort of stuff. But effectively, we need to do that because if you can't really just make changes to balance like significant ones without screwing people's characters over, obviously. So you need to have some kind of thing like that in order to be able to do that.
Just going back quickly, we have a kind of few classifications of things we do address when it does impact balance, and we are trying to be ultra conservative, but if it is bricking instances, as in it is just absolutely tanking instances, affecting the performance and thus affecting the performance for other users, we almost always have to address it. You can't just let that be. Now we obviously try and reduce the impact on the server, generally because of some sort of infinite loop or anything of the sort like that, or something happening per frame that shouldn't happen, and all of a sudden now.
Like if you're getting the server frame rate to be like 1 FPS, then that is not right? Like we have to actually sort that. So that is something that we will do a mid-league nerf to address.
That's why they
ideally in such a way where it still leaves the build perfectly viable. It's just that it's no longer completely destroying what's going on.
The other things where it does nerf and has an impact is, of course, when there is simply something clearly not working intended. So like an example of that, which I won't try and pronounce, but the shield that increases effect of your socketed runes and soul cores, and that was just obviously applying to all of them, not the one socketed in itself. That is obviously a nerf. It was never meant to work that way. I don't think that really surprises anyone when that gets changed. It's very clearly not working as intended. So those two we're generally just going to pull the trigger on almost always. Right. We're still thinking like, okay, especially in the performance case, that's like blatantly our fault, and there is economy there, and then obviously there are people who are going to lose their character builds because of it. Maybe, hopefully not. We try and obviously bring down the frequency or the infinite loop element or the per frame while also buffing the damage. And then we make a note of it or like reassess this later when there's a new economy, and we'll come back and reassess that. But, often protecting the instances, protecting the server performance for other users, and obviously fixing bugs are, something we're going to do, and so that can have an impact. But just like at this point, preferably for all the other main nerfs where you're just blatantly nerfing someone's build or nerfing a build, we're trying to currently push that towards the economy/league reset kind of point.
That makes sense.
All right.
All that makes sense.
It's a very extensive answer. Appreciate that. That's one of the things that makes this very fun for us to do. We ask a question that we just
you got like 5 different answers out of that. Oh my god.
We are going to circle back to what you mentioned as well earlier, Mark. You said coming back to reassess a decision that's been made, and the topic we're going to open up is the 2-step verification security for accounts with certain things that's happened recently. So the real question that we come down to with everything that's going down is, I guess the first one is, was there a data breach at GGG?
Right.
And following that up with, are you going to reassess the decision of two-step verification?
All right. So this
Really?
is unfortunately really sucks, and I was really hoping we'd get a post out this before we did this interview, but unfortunately we haven't quite finished assessing yet. So there has been a situation where someone got access to an admin account on our website, and we now understand how that happened. And we also understand, we don't fully understand the scope of everything that occurred here, but we're sort of in the process of like looking at logs and so on. And there was a few really shitty things that occurred here that I'm very unhappy about. So the first one, just to say this, is that the thing that happened here was actually kind of the same thing that happened a while ago when through a Steam, effectively a Steam account was compromised through Steam support. So effectively what happened is one of our administrator accounts had a Steam account associated with it, and this was a Steam account that the person who had it attached didn't really kind of know. I mean, obviously they could have checked, but like they didn't really consider the fact that this was like this old Steam account that they don't even use anymore was attached to their admin account. And so effectively what happened was that got compromised through Steam support. So I don't know like all the details exactly what happens there, but effectively what happens is that like they are able to somehow provide like details that they managed to find on someone, like the last 4 digits of their credit card information or whatever, through that they get through some other kind of means, and then they provide enough information to Steam support where they're able to get Steam to change the credentials on the account, which happened without us noticing, because once again this was an account that this person doesn't log into, so there was no like they didn't realize that this was
socially engineered. Just what
and
happens.
then another thing. This was compounded by the fact, and this one was really, really crap, that whenever a customer support person makes a change to an account, they there's like an audit log, right, of like all the actions, like the events that they've done. And this effectively means that like when we investigate like, hey, what's happening with this account that got compromised, like we obviously look at the events and see like, hey, was there anything, like what happened here, right? Did someone change a password? Was something going on with that? And there was actually a bug where the event for setting a new password on an account was incorrectly in the back end labeled as a note rather than like an audit event. And what that meant was that notes are things that like customer service can add to people's accounts, and they can edit them and delete them. And so the password change thing being a note could be deleted by a customer service person accidentally, rather than
and then so it got deleted.
So like rather than being permanently there in a way that no one could change. And so that effectively meant that what was happening is the person who managed to get an account, they were compromising the accounts by setting a random password, then deleting the note afterwards to say that had happened. And so when we would look at accounts, we just wouldn't see this. And so it was like really not obvious to us that what was going on there.
It was an actual inside job.
I don't have like full information yet about exactly the extent of everything that happened, but what I can tell you is that 66 notes were deleted. So that would imply that 66 accounts were compromised. Now, it does extend slightly back further than what our log history is. So I think there's like, so we only keep logs for 30 days. And that's like a whole, privacy rules around that stuff means that that's your log retention. Now, there were 5 days before that where the account was compromised, but this is all pre-launch of PoE2.
Yeah.
So effectively, there were the 5 days back in November when we don't have logs for, and then after that point, there were 66 accounts that were that had notes deleted. Now, the reason why I am using that phraseology here is because the things were deleted from the frickin' event stream. Like, we literally don't know what happened here. Like, the only thing I've got to go by is the web server logs, which don't actually record like all the data that's sent in a web request. It's just like the address of the page they went to, right? So effectively we can see like basic information, but because the thing itself that they were doing involved deleting the frickin' records of the fact that they were doing it, meant that like, yes, it's unfortunately very difficult for us to track down full information about this. Now, we are going to be posting a post with like all the information that we can possibly gather that we're sort of still gathering. And we were obviously initially very afraid that there'd been some kind of larger data breach here where like they would somehow had access to our servers or something like that was going on. Like because we had no idea initially, right? So we're kind of like, oh shit, what the hell's going on here? But now that we've understood that the vector was via a Steam account like that, it kind of means that like effectively what they had access to was the same stuff that customer service had access to, and all of that stuff is logged except this one thing that was not like logged due to this other thing. And then since then we've also added a bunch of extra security stuff that honestly should have already been in place around this to sort this out. So
it's just the way it is.
All of that is to say that like we totally fucked up here with like security stuff on this account. Like we're certainly not going to have any Steam accounts linked to like we're going to audit, make sure that there's no Steam accounts linked to any customer service admin accounts any longer. Like that certainly needs to not happen if there's going to be this kind of attack vector. As well as we've added a few other measures that, to just make sure that this sort of shit doesn't happen again. All of that really, really sucks. And especially because, like, as I said, just due to the fact that the stuff about it is deleted, we can't, like, easily find out what even frickin' happened. So there's going to be more investigation and working out what's happening here. But, that seems to be what
weird to fuck up security like that?
So it makes sense. Quickly, for the people that are going to give it, like, a quick recap, this was a social engineering breach. This was not, like, a server-side data breach of an admin account. And this is a one-off, one account. It's now a closed case scenario. The viewers do not have to do anything on their side to worry about their information.
So the moment that we realized that something had gone wrong, we just immediately reset all the passwords on all the admin accounts and deleted all the sessions just to make sure that everything was kosher. So from that moment on, there was no more like accounts getting compromised or anything like that.
Sure.
And then now it's just been a matter of us like doing a bunch of log analysis, and it's actually quite like. Because the only way we've got it is the web logs, and it's taking a while just to process all the stuff, and there's obviously a lot of human investigation. Like we just haven't yet been able to prepare a full report about it, but we are going to be posting one hopefully in the next day or two that has all of the stuff about that. But that was just really, really crappy. So then going back to the actual question about two-factor authentication, I mean, in this particular case, it would have actually helped because it was compromised through our frickin' support interface, right? Except for that, probably it would have helped in the sense that if we had added if there was two-factor auth, presumably the bug about where it didn't get logged when someone changed it wouldn't have applied to that because, it's a new thing that they wouldn't have the same bug for. So I suppose it would have helped in that sense. But that's the thing with that. So then talking about two-factor auth. So first of all, I'm completely not against two-factor auth in any regard. The only issue with it is that it's easy to implement two-factor auth. What is hard to implement is all the policy around how to recover when people inevitably lose their second factor. And so that's the kind of tricky part to actually deal with. It's kind of one of those things where we will do it, but we're just not quite prepared yet to be able to do it with all the customer support stuff we would have to do. And it's kind of one of those annoyingly deep holes of
he's right. It's not hard.
Someone loses their password. What do you do to verify it? The two-factor auth thing. What do you do to verify this? And it's okay, so now you start to have to worry about what personal information can they give you, and then now it's storing personal information, and then what's the GDPR implications of that? And there's just it's just a whole rabbit hole of just random policy stuff that all kind of comes around to that stuff. Effectively. What I will tell you is that we're immediately going to add two-factor auth to all of our support accounts. You can bet on that, and that is not a problem. That is not a problem for us to do there because the policy around that is you just walk in person to the frickin' guy. If you lose it, then you can physically deal with that, right?
Yeah.
That one is how we sort it out. But as I said, we will get to it, and it is a serious thing. We definitely want to have this. It's just a question of just getting it done, really, all the policy stuff around it. They
probably need a second level of verification for changing
it's all support nightmare around how to deal with it.
Well, I appreciate the extremely vocal transparency about what's going on.
Crazy level of transparency here.
Appreciate that as well, and we won't grill you about it or anything.
Holy shit.
Appreciate that information.
Wow.
We'll move on here to a little bit more fun topic, which is upcoming content for the game. So we've been asked, one of the most common questions we've had here is things like roadmap for cadence of releases. You guys originally stated 6 to 12 months for full release.
I'm surprised they even talked about it.
How many leagues between? There's 6 classes. So if it's 6 months, it's 1 class a month. You know where I'm going with this. So, can we expect any information in terms of the cadence of releases, upcoming things like weapons, classes, skill gems, etc.?
Right. So the cadence we want to hit is sort of something similar to the kind of league cadence that we've done before for PoE 1. So that's I think that it works. Things work the best when you've kind of got releases that are fairly large that have a significant amount of stuff in them to actually bring people back and play and so on. So you can kind of expect a similar thing like that.
That's cool.
For the actual what is going to be in it, obviously I'm not going to talk about that because we'll save that for the live stream and all that sort of stuff. But effectively, that's kind of what you can expect. That being said, there's also a thing where so we want to be able to do the balance patch addressing the balance issues that we've talked about as soon as we can. But in order to do a patch like that, you need to have enough content in it to be able to make sure that people actually come back and play it and like that sort of thing as well.
Yeah.
Like you need to be able to make enough changes and like add enough content that it's actually exciting. So we're going to work towards getting a like a PoE 2 sort of new league with new content in it basically as soon as we possibly can. So we're like I can't exactly say a date or anything, but like we're gonna rush for it, right? Like we're gonna really try and do it because we want to get to that point of stability of the balance that we're sort of happier with as soon as we can as well. So as I said, not going to say a date, but basically just. Look, we work reasonably fast. We're going to try and get it out as quick as we can. Hopefully we get that relatively soon for you guys.
Okay.
So I'm just going to go ahead and assume that new acts is going to be involved in this. But I guess a little extra question to that when we talk about Act 4, 5, 6. Is the plans to add like one act, or are you guys?
Yeah. So this is honestly one of the freaking hardest questions ever, right? Like this is actually something that we've discussed back and forth so many times because. Like, if you're talking about it from a pure storyline perspective and like kind of what makes sense, like, so there would be, okay, so imagine we release one act, right? It's like, how does it fit exactly into having the leveling, like, do you go like 1, 2, 3, 4 and then like 1, 2 again? Yeah. Like, that'd be kind of weird. Or like 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, or like, do you have Act 4, you can also play Act 1 or Act 4? Or like, like it's kind of just weird, right? And like, so like from that perspective, it's like, oh, we should do them all at once, like at some point. But then on the other hand, we're like, okay, if we don't release the acts one at a time,
it'd be hard to get.
And that kind of means
back.
like all the content from that we're sort of busy having to work on. We still have to have good releases, right? And so that means we have to have like more stuff in what we do release if it doesn't contain an act. So there's kind of this like complicated like puzzle around this, and it's like, and what we kind of thought like. There are issues around this, but effectively we're like, okay, well, we're going to have to make Act 4. We have to be making Act 4 in the background right now anyway, right? So we don't technically have to decide what we're doing about this, like, right now. So, like, that's sort of happening.
So not for a while, guys.
Anyway. So I guess that is to say that, like, there's still a lot of argument about this fact. And it's honestly such a hard one because I don't think there's a really great answer. Like releasing the acts one at a time would make the making content so much easier because we get to immediately utilize all the stuff from that act to like make the content. Like it'll be so much, and like also just immediately makes a release feel really big, right? So like that would be something that we could do, and it also would be good for our studio because like there's this phenomenon that always happens where like. You say, okay, this is when we're making this thing, but if people are not actually going to play it, then like people have a different definition of finished from like, oh, people are actually going to play this versus like it just has to be ready internally, So like for just a production perspective, like I feel like the game will get made faster if we do release the acts, just because it forces us to actually release them and like forces everyone to get it into a really playable state.
That's probably true.
But on the other hand, as I said, there's like all these kind of like practical issues with it. So
damned if you do, damned if you don't, huh?
Yeah, I know it's a bit of a tough one. So I mean, I guess the answer to that is still to come, and we just need to work out what we feel about this one way or the other. So I guess you'll see when we do our next announcement what we've kind of come up with. But as I said, in the meantime, it's not like we don't have to just make Act 4 anyway right now in the background. So that's they're continuing to do that as well as all the people in the more sort of balancey side of things working on balance, which will get shipped much earlier. Yeah.
All right. Let's just move on to the next topic to make sure we actually cover these questions. We have a long list.
Sure.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about a can of worms called State of Magic Find. Now, the perception has been one thing. And, I mean, shout out to Slippery Jim for the absolute
remove Magic Find.
Which is kind of showing that it's fine.
It's trash.
So what do you guys think about Magic Find in its current state?
It's a very tricky question. Now, what I will say to start with is that like the way the Magic Find formula works in PoE 2 is literally identical to how it was in PoE 1 as far as diminishing returns and everything is concerned. The difference is just down to what rarity is giving you as opposed to what it was giving you in PoE 1. Our argument for why Magic Find should be fine in PoE 2 is effectively like we're not doing what happened in PoE 1 where you got like all these quantity mods and all that sort of stuff like that. Like it's effectively the Magic Find in PoE 2 is what PoE 1 had back when PoE 1 was first released, right? Where it was kind of like, and it kind of was fine then. So the argument was, well, why shouldn't it not be fine now? I guess there's another compounding with this. There's another contingent of people who would say that like anything at all that affects item drops should just not be a thing at all.
No,
and which is like a position you can take, and I don't know that I necessarily.
I don't agree with that.
Agree with that position,
it's
but it's another position you can take. So I guess all of that really is to say that like I don't think there's anything about it that's not working as it's intended to work. And ultimately, the purpose of something like Magic Find is to kind of give you another axis of build design beyond just like doing the most DPS, which, like that's kind of the ultimate goal. So but I mean, that's kind of where it's at, really. There's definitely more to look into here, though. I don't know if you've got a different opinion.
Not really. I was just thinking the main difference between, say, PoE 1 was you fully saturate into every single item being a unique item.
That's the difference.
Whereas in PoE 2, you saturate into higher tier rares. You actually cannot fully saturate into unique items. So it is impossible.
You love it? I'm not a fan.
So yeah, it certainly holds different value. I don't know how. But then again, I suspect a lot of the audience who are finding Magic Find to be a problem would find it a problem in both games, which, again, completely fair perspective to take. I don't know. There's a little bit more to look into here for sure. Like, we come back from holiday and we're like, all right, let's fix everything we can in a week. There's this list of like 100 things, and we pick what we think is the most impactful 10. And so, there's a lot of these things that are just outlying on a list for us to really actually look into and investigate more and see, what part of it people are liking and not liking. Because, even though you had Slippery Jim do this, the great service, there'll be a lot of people who just disagree with that. He says it's fine. There'll be a lot of people who disagree with him as well. So we just need to look into this a bit more, honestly, to get a better conclusion. But personally speaking, I don't think it's a problem currently. But I might change my mind as well upon reading all of this and looking into it more. So we'll see how it goes.
So a follow-up.
I don't know if you. Okay.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You can continue.
No, you go for it.
Sure. So a follow-up to this is so the state of Magic Find is a question. Specifically. Do you have a belief on how you believe it's influenced the economy? I'm seeing a lot of comments sometimes when I'm like Magic Find's the reason, inflation's the thing, etc. So what is your guys' belief in terms of how much Magic Find is actually making an impact in the current economy?
Actually, there's another difference from PoE 1, actually, of course, is that Magic Find now increases the tiers of currency you find.
Yes.
Which,
That's crazy.
I don't honestly think that we have an informed enough opinion on this topic, actually, to be fair. I don't think it's been our primary concern this week because of the fact that there's other things that we think, we really wanted to make sure that the actual play experience is prioritized as the main thing. That's the kind of, our focus right now. Which, I mean, obviously this affects it, but it's kind of something where it's a slightly longer term concern. So it's something we need to definitely investigate more. But it was really that map playability and making sure that, because when people are dying to things that they think are bullshit and stuff like that, that's kind of something that we were more concerned about. So that's, I would say we need to definitely do more. We need to form an opinion about this before we can say more about it, I think.
It's not fully okay. That's fair. It's not the priority right now.
In PoE 1, item quantity was removed, which affected currency. In PoE 2, you now bake that into
I see what you mean. Yep, that's a very good point.
What is the reasoning for reintroducing quantity that you made a decision to remove in PoE 1?
I don't think that we looked at that as reintroducing quantity. But you are correct that it does increase the quantity. Well, okay, it's not that it increases the quantity of currency. It increases the type, the tier of the currency you get, which you would look at that as quantity because you don't care about whatever transmutes are dropping. You only care about the higher ones, and so as far as you're concerned, that is quantity. So I would say we just didn't really look at that as quantity, but you're not wrong about that, right? That is true.
Well, it's certainly going to be a problem if it is perceived as that.
Hope they dress on death. They already did.
Rarity is the only way to thus have enough currency to say roll your maps effectively and also have enough to spend on gear and whatnot. That's certainly a problem. In which case some adjustments probably likely do need to be made. But again, we're just speculating now. We need to look into this a heck of a lot more in order to get an actual informed decision there.
That's fair. I do have one last follow-up on it, and it's a discussion we had 4 or 5 years ago with Chris Wilson, and the topic was actually about currency drop as well. And the comment was that the numbers were fine on GGG's side. The numbers looked fine. It is accurate. You are dropping more currency than ever. But the numbers didn't matter when the perception in the community is the direct opposite. So how do you think about tackling that specific conversation when the perception is completely opposite to what seemingly the reality is?
That's a great question. Right? This is a really good
question.
So
are you saying that the community perception is that currency doesn't drop enough?
The perception is that rarity is a mandatory stat.
Yes.
Oh, sure. No, yeah, well, absolutely,
a lot
right?
of people feel that way. Yeah.
If the community feels that way, we should absolutely look into it and do more about it, right? Like, but bear in mind that, yeah, I sort of often say, you know, like when the community has a problem, this is an invitation for us to understand the problem and then for us to address it in the way we want to address it. And that way isn't necessarily exactly what the community is saying, but it's just effectively like, I do want to keep doing things until the community is no longer unhappy about it. But that may not necessarily look exactly like in the form that they're expecting, if you know what I mean. So yeah, we have to look more into this. That's absolutely the case, right? And we can tell that because of the fact that people are unhappy. So yeah, we will look into more into it.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of unhappy, we're going to get into state of melee / maces is the next portion of the questions here. So let's talk about warrior and maces. What are your guys' feelings currently on the state of maces? How do you want mace skills in particular to function in Path of Exile 2? Obviously, they're very long cast times. Movement of mobs can be very quick. You can get stunned, interrupted. On the tree as well, there's many nodes that literally reduce like attack speed in order to gain other things. So more or less, warriors in a position where a lot of people feel like it's clunky, too slow for the current in-gameplay loop, or warrior feels like maybe the first class designed when the vision of PoE2 was fairly slow. So what is your guys' response as to the state of mace skills, and where would you like to take it?
Well, our first question I would have for you is, do you think it's a problem during campaign or only in endgame?
I would say it is more specifically a problem in an exponential ramping as you continue the game until you hit a point where there's pinnacle bosses, and then you can kind of one-shot pinnacle bosses with some of the setups currently. So there's a mid portion of the middle to later in-game in which it feels like a problem, specifically because you have things like volatiles that actually track you, and if you stay in position, you're heavily punished. So it seems counterintuitive to the design of some of the mobs.
I do think that there is a problem in game.
There you go.
Here. I'm not exactly sure what we need to do about it yet, though. I'm glad to hear you say that it's an in-game issue and not a campaign issue, because I have to say that my experience playing Warrior through campaign is actually that it's fine. But I did hear a bunch of people talking about that as if that was not fine, and I think that it is. Like, I think,
not the good
or at least
kind of
I can't reproduce the issue during campaign if that's the case. So really, it is more of an in-game issue, and I don't know that I've got a solution for you right now. But it's. We do need to, like, once again, it's one of those more subtle things that we need to look into, and I suspect that the big balance patch will be looking at that a lot more. There is something about the warrior that doesn't scale in the same way that some of the other classes do, I believe. But that we sort of need to understand what the other classes end up looking like as well a little bit to understand that as well. But I don't know if you've got any more different opinions about that.
Well, I mean, the attack speed is a big part of it, right? You obviously have, that is a multiplicative axis that every other cast speed or attack speed is a multiplicative axis every other, or I guess comet trigger speed, that every other class is getting, and the warrior has a deficiency in that. And even if you were to get it, yes, obviously there's the fixed attack times which don't scale. It's probably a combination of those are too punishing, or there's too much of them, and there's not enough attack speed available. It'll be somewhere in that region for sure where we have to make some adjustments, and it probably won't even be that drastic to get it to feel right. And of course, like, it is easy to compare it to, especially, I know you said more like late mid to mid end game thing, but like when you look at the like top end, it's very easy to compare it to the absolute insanity that is, like, Pillar of the Cage God with Hoa and all of that, which is just ridiculous right now. It's very easy to compare it to that and be like, well, Warrior will never be viable. But there are also a lot of quite good end-game warriors that are certainly being played, and I don't want to certainly make it seem like it's completely useless.
I
mean people using maces, not just people who are doing it for the ascendancies.
Karn's a notable example. He's like level 99 in SSF, but he's having to use the Herald of Ice tech, which is very highly speculative to be nerfed, right, in order to make it feel good. So while I would agree there's people that are doing it, I would also argue there are people that are doing it as a masochist in order to be like, I'm a warrior guy and I need to do it regardless.
There are also others, maybe not that advanced and not that far up in terms of her level. But yeah, sure, understood. Like, it's certainly on the weaker end at the end game, like,
it just doesn't
without
feel
question. That being said, I don't think it will take too much to get it there. But yeah, again, it's part of this massive balance, recalibration we didn't need to do now that we've seen the state of everything.
Right.
Warrior or mace skills are certainly on the ones where you're going to do a lot more bringing up than you're going to do bringing down. Aside from things like the Hammer of the Gods just in one shot with bleed, and then the boss is dead, and you don't do anything, right? You get those anomalies out there where it's like, they're gonna die in one shot no matter what.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, things like that aren't going to be buffed necessarily, but
fair enough.
There is more to buff in the mace spectrum than there is in most of the other things, I'd say, yes.
Mm-hmm. So that answers the offensive spectrum for the warrior. Now let's talk about the defensive. And one of the things in the reveal video was armor, for instance, is getting fixed and or buffed, I should say, and we'll talk about that in a moment.
I wouldn't. One of the reasons we didn't dwell on that too much is because I wouldn't want people to think that that's more of a change than it is. Like, we are doing a bit of a buff to armor, but it's not like the hugest deal. I think there is more we have to do. Like, there's more complicated stuff we have to do with armor, I think, to make it more interesting. But there's a lot of arguments about this. One, because it is like, I'll just say that there's a lot of arguments about like how exactly this should be addressed. One concern that we have, which is probably totally out of left field as far as what the players would say,
there's too many
is
multiples.
that we don't think that there's enough of a difference between the big hit and the small hit. There's a number in the formula that is different in PoE 1 than it is in PoE 2. That results in the armor being the difference between a small hit and a big hit in PoE 2 and PoE 1. It matters more in PoE 1. But in addition to that, so we actually think that PoE 2 might be wrong in this regard, and we need to change it. But in addition to that, there's also a thing that's happened where like white monsters can hit harder in PoE 1 and PoE 2 than they did in PoE 1, and that means that the thing that armor is supposed to because part of the intention with armor is it's like, okay, like when you're talking about like big boss hits, like it has less of an effect than what it would have off like a bunch of small hits, but sometimes the small hits from a white mob are not even that different from what a boss hits you with. And so this is actually meaning that the sort of the idea of armor being based on the damage hit is kind of got like a few issues that we have to deal with. So I don't know if you've got any more thoughts on this particular topic, but it is like something that we have to sort of worry about a little bit.
Yeah. It's again one of these things I hate coming in here so unequipped, but again, it's just the timing with the holiday and all that, with all these things where it's like, have to look into, but that is the nature of it. I mean, especially once there's an actual released product, it's like a good, 50% of our time goes into having to investigate and look into live operations problems like this.
So we are buffing a little bit of armor a little bit in this patch for because there are some issues there. But honestly, the full solution for armor is going to have to be more complicated, and we're going to have to sort of work out some stuff around it. There's definitely something that I think there was another thing as well, is that like the other defenses tend to have like extra mechanics that are easier to access than what armor has. Which is another sort of side thing, which is like not entirely obvious when you're designing it initially. So it might be that there's more like supplementary things that the armor, like the strength characters effectively need to have around defense. And so like stuff like that can kind of matter a lot. So
like Wind Dancer's universally just better than Scavenge Plating as an example, if those are meant to be paired. One is just like you have it, and the other is I have to armor break, and then on bosses it's much harder to sustain. So we've made changes there, of course. We did buff the armor. I'd say it's obviously hard because of the big hit, small hit, but it's probably in the like 15% more effective kind of region. Our changes in 011. And then a lot of it is also like, okay, if you consider that evasion also applies to damage mitigation from Invoker. You got a lot of things going on with acrobatics, which turns evasion into arguably, I mean, sure, it penalizes your evasion, but like it then kind of gives you almost as much PDR against certain hits as a lot of armor, and then you have a lot of very, very strong defensive, with Grim Feast and Energy Shield, and so
there's too many multipliers.
It's not only armor is weak; it's also that evasion and Energy Shield have some extreme strongs that are going on. Not to say, these are all going to be nerfed. I'm just saying there's some meeting in the middle that we need to do for sure.
So to give you a feeling from, like, I played Warrior 90 first. That was the first thing I did, and I would enjoy Warrior as an archetype the most. Would you say it's a fair statement to say the Warrior and Mace skills and, sort of that side of the tree in particular is in a state where it has the worst of all of them? So it has the worst of the defenses and armor. It has the worst effective HP in terms of life, and it has basically the worst offensive capabilities as well. So you could see why I'm feedbacking so hard in relation to this archetype.
That's what I think.
That's a brutal savaging, but I suppose I can't necessarily disagree with any of those with any of those assessments.
Fair enough. We can move on to the next topic then, unless you have other statements on it.
Oh, what do they have?
You have shields.
Yeah. I mean, you are right that it effectively falls in that way. Yeah. Let's just sure.
Yep.
Okay. So moving forward here, we have charms. So I saw that there were some notable changes in relation to charms. I thought it was a great change to be able to see when they're actually being activated, as well as the charms that are there as well. So some clarity things in relation to charm. I don't know if I saw whether or not charms in particular are actually getting tweaked in terms of number side of things, or if it was just some transparency related to charms. But how do you guys feel about?
No, these are good questions.
We're not tweaking numbers in this patch. However, there's definitely something not right about charms as far as like the usefulness goes and all that sort of stuff. Like we need to do something. I don't think we've decided what it is yet, but it's clear to us at this point. Like, so charms came in like super late, and I just don't think they're quite like working out as well as I'd hoped. Like they just need something else, but we don't quite know what that will be yet. But we did want to at least make, like, one of the issues they did have is like you couldn't even tell when they helped you. So that certainly wasn't helping the case for them. So we can at least fix that. But yeah, there probably does need to be more stuff done with them, I think. I think it comes down a little bit to like how much do ailments matter against the player, and you know, that's sort of something that
there's a few other ones. Like there's the one that's like unaffected. You know, the next time you get slows, protect you from slows, and honestly, a lot of the debuffs applied by monsters haven't been correctly classified as slows. And so it doesn't even work against them, and like there's a little bit of things like that where
it's
aware
of that one.
Yeah, it's just kind of a bit bad. But yeah, there's a balance there of like, okay, most people have one slot, and then you got these mandatory mods to get more. But I don't
think you get enough charm slots. Just like I feel like you barely find belts with the extra slots, to be honest.
I agree.
I mean, we really just didn't finish. I mean, we increased the weightings. We've had patched that in since release. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Can't remember what patch it was in, but honestly, we're not all the way there yet, for sure. It's one of those things where it's not like ruining experience for players, at least. It's like, you know, just an underwhelming thing that needs some love, for sure. So it's not exactly number in the top 10 of the hit list, but like without a doubt, I would expect to see improvements around there in the future.
Good. Very good.
Following up on the charms there, any thoughts regarding adding more charm slots for uniques? Because it feels really hindering to equip a unique when it comes to the topic of charms.
That's a good point.
So this is the whole, like, if you have a unique belt, you only have one always.
Yeah, you know, that's not a bad idea.
I also just want to add more slots outside of unique, so more on the tree and other ways to get them as well. Sure. So you don't necessarily have to.
It's a good point. Very good point.
Because, like, there's nothing. I think at the time we had it that like you couldn't have more than 3. Like internally it was implemented that way, and now it's like you could have 50 slots, plus 1 slots, but you'd only have 3, obviously. So we can give away a lot more +1 now and plus whatever we want all over the place. But yeah, I mean, that is a way, yes, that some unique should have it, and probably more on the tree, more in other ways. I have to have a look at it, but yeah, there's no harm in it now, at least.
Yeah. All right. We're going to move over to another topic, which is, speaking of belts and trading the unique belts, for example. State of crafting and future plans is also involved. So I'm going to start with crafting and future plans you have there, and then we'll talk about trade. So the current state of crafting is very different from PoE 1. The perception, again, to go back on that in PoE 2, is that you're not actually crafting unless it's Rogpog crafting. You're actually just pulling the arm on the vendor machine, on the gambling machines. So what's the state here and future plans?
Yeah, it's a little bit too RNG in my opinion.
I don't know that there's a huge amount we can say about this right now.
Yeah. Just like a little bit more determinism would be really nice.
Particular thoughts that you think you can go into? I mean, like one thing, of course, is that PoE 2 just has less crafting systems than PoE 1, just due to the fact that we add these typically with leagues and so on. So there's just less going on, which means that if you're like a PoE 1 player, then you're going to see less complexity there, for sure. But I don't think that's exactly what you're getting at, right? Like, I guess there's some theory. I mean, effectively what you're saying is people want more determinism, right? Yeah. Which is like a continuous, endless thing that like people.
There's a fine line.
They don't want to get
to
harvest. They don't want to harvest again.
We're on the certainly more on the slot machine side of that line, like without a doubt, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And there's more we need to do, I would say, to get towards that line. But that's our line that we determine. Not that I know how to describe that, because there's plenty of people who are just going to be like make everything fully deterministic all the way.
No. Bad design.
I mean, before we released, it's
an ARPG.
We had for a while a system that involved like deconstructing mods and then putting specific mods on items and so on. And like we just kind of like no one. Like with a system like that, we were never able to get it to the point where both people who played the game were happy and like we could be happy as far as like what it would let you do. And that like there's still something along those lines we might be able to do one day to kind of work that out, but we just kind of haven't really hit it yet. The socketables were kind of supposed to be the thing that was you had full control over. That's like determinism, and so that like.
Which has a lot of room to expand.
Yeah,
sure. So there's more stuff you can do there. But I guess because people see that as supplementary, they don't even necessarily see it as part of the crafting system, which is kind of interesting. Like it sort of replaced the crafting system in a way, but then, as I said, people don't really see it as part of it. So, I don't know. Like, I mean, I guess the thing is we just have to find a way to do more things that make people feel like they have more control without actually sacrificing the without making it too easy to just get the best shit, which is obviously always the concern, like making sure that there's still enough room for there to be items that are significant, like that are better than other items. So I mean, that's kind of where we're at, I suppose.
The other thing, of course, being it is important that to make sure as we add more of this determinism or get towards that line, that we don't then immediately devalue all item drops on the ground, right? Because that creates a different problem when now all of a sudden you don't really care about what you're finding, or you're only caring about normal items you're finding, or you create a different problem by doing that for sure.
And there is an argument certainly by people internally that PoE1 got to the point of that being a problem, where you no longer cared so much about what was on the ground because you crafting would always get you something better.
True.
Like that is a concern for sure.
Harvest.
But I guess that's kind of just our overall, just like nebulous cloud of thoughts on this matter, without really getting into too many specifics, I suppose. I mean, I guess I don't know if you've got anything else to say about it.
Well, that being said, if we add more, we're adding something to Expedition, we don't know what it is necessarily, or what it will do to the thing, and then we're adding, what I would say, greater essences are too rare right now.
There's not that many of them.
And what else is there in there? I guess like there's certainly room to expand on the Omen system to do more there. Of course, people would argue then they don't want that to be the core crafting system to be gated behind ritual as opposed to core drop, which is then another consideration to make. And you get this cascading series of questions and stuff we need to answer, of which need to think about it more and look more. But certainly there is the feedback of like the crafting is too slot machiney, is something we're listening to and we have seen, and it is I'd say that is more towards our top 10 list of things to discuss and solve sooner than later.
Right.
I think that deterministic crafting is always something that's very sought after and popular. But I feel
it's not always good for the game,
I might
though.
be out of terms here, but my own personal perspective, I'll say that, is not the lack of deterministic crafting per se. It's lack of options to craft with. Because the slot machine crafting, we have that in PoE 1 as well. It's called Exalted, it's divining, and whatever we're doing.
But nobody does that.
It's not deterministic crafting. Yeah, exactly, Harvest. It's not deterministic crafting that's lacking. It is options to do something with the actual items. Because right now, you drop an item, and what you can do is annul it or exalt it, or you can pop some chaos orbs. And the meta crafts, which are behind the omens, that's a different topic, which we're going to tackle a little bit here. We're talking about trading. But the crafting has less to do with deterministic approaches, but rather giving us options to work with on an item to make us actually craft it, even if that means RNG and then X-Slam or something.
Right. And if that's the case, then more content will get you that, because
that will will solve itself over time.
Right. Because as we just add more stuff during early access, there's just going to be more and more of those kinds of crazy systems.
Okay.
But we'll make sure that, like I say, over time, it's not like there's something inevitable about it for sure. But because it is a bigger problem now, we would make sure that we try and ensure that as we're adding more content, it is leaning towards adding more options there and solving these problems that people have, as opposed to just like, I will do something cool and maybe it does and maybe it doesn't. So we'll have a lot more problem solving, designing, content created by more towards solving the problems, as opposed to, when you're at a point where you have so much content, a lot of the time you can be like, what are we going to do? Let's just make something cool and awesome. Whereas here it's going to be like, let's look at problems to solve and create content that comes from that. So there's like kind of two ways of coming up with the content, and certainly this is one that will be a problem that we're looking to try and solve by doing that for sure.
Okay.
That's fair. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but following up to the state of trading, I mean, obviously we have trading being in its state that it is, but there's the volatility problem of the market's economy being player-based. For now, we have a golden standard of trading divine orbs, which quite literally holds close to zero value in terms of actual player usage outside of a handful of specific unique items, and is representative of trade power in the community.
It's
since
a
there is
fiat
no
currency.
natural divine orb sink, which exalted orbs have, for example, they just continue going up, and the inflation is just rampant at this point.
So I would have thought that if there was no divine orb sink, then the value of divines would go down rather than up. Like, presumably, if the value of divines is going up in other currency, then it's the other currency that there's too much of rather than the divines.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is, like, they become the golden standard, and since no one's using them, we get a higher quantity of them. And the result of it is that now, since that is the item people are using, or the currency people are pricing their items off, they're now, one rare, one life pair of boots with 10% movement speed now costs 50 divines, if I'm going to use some exaggerated examples.
Okay, so you're talking about the price in divines is going up as opposed to the price of
the divine is
the value of divine is going up.
The item value,
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, there's nothing I can kind of initially go into with this other than just that, like, we just have to look at this and
maybe
work
the
out what we're
players
going
are
to
stupid.
use to sync these things more. The intention with divines is that you'd sync them into making, like, if there's enough, like,
here's the problem,
things where you want to reroll mod values on, which, like, is uniques ideally. Like, the implication of that is that there aren't the uniques that people are wanting to roll to get good values on, right? I mean, I'm assuming that's the reason.
Some not enough. Yeah. Well, I mean, we don't have enough unique items.
For sure.
We don't. We need a lot more. Which is another goal we have, of course. But I mean, so yes, there's not enough uniques, let alone enough uniques to be using divine orbs for and
of course, the thing in PoE1 where things were priced in
opinion.
that currency can help, but we don't have anything quite like that, I suppose.
Brassstone and PoE1.
I mean, look, if that's a problem, we'll just like find a way to sync them, I suppose. But ideally, if everything's working correctly, they'd be syncing themselves due to the fact that there's enough things you want to reroll values on, and like uniques you want to reroll values on. I'm actually curious to know whether people are even really bothering with that. Like, are people actually bothering to reroll unique values?
I guess some, but not many.
Right, not many.
Not many.
Astromentus.
Yeah,
that's like the two main ones, I think. Like, no one's gonna play Divine Orb on a Venter's Gamble, so it's like that's literally gambling.
Yeah.
But like in PoE1, we have the option of meta crafting being a currency sync for Divine Orb. More exalted. So it creates this natural flow, but also provides this crafting method for people to actually kind of help the state of crafting that people are looking for. Right now, they're omens, and because of this type of inflation happening,
that's a big one now with stat stacking, isn't it?
Most players that even players that plays a lot. I haven't bothered myself. I played a lot.
I haven't played for like 3 weeks
and everything. Like, I haven't touched an omen because they're too pricey
big
to
one.
use.
Yeah.
Like, it's a very select few players that even engages with them because of how priced they are, and that just separates a lot of crafting from even a larger player base.
One other point of this is it might tie into a previous discussion we had about Magic Find influencing the economy in relation to currency drops being upgraded. So I know that's one portion we talked about you're going to look at previously too. So I think these two probably tie in together here.
I don't know that I've got anything particularly smart to say about this right now, honestly. Though.
You got it, bro.
We are at least making omens more common, so hopefully.
Yes.
I have never dropped a divine.
I think we then also need more uniques.
I've never had one.
And a lot more uniques, obviously, and a lot more uniques that would have divine sinks. And then I suspect the answer also is additional sinks of currency.
No rarity? I have two rarity.
I suspect it's a bit of everything.
Two rarity items.
Okay. So we'll move on here. We have a significant amount of questions left. So I'm gonna try to speed up the cadence of these a little bit here as we're about maybe halfway through, but well over halfway through the interview. So we're gonna talk a little bit about state of in-game and state of league mechanics here. So I'm specifically going to go into league mechanics first here. So some league mechanics, essences, strongbox, to name a few, feel a little bit like noob traps. So I was kind of hoping to hear where your guys' thoughts are in relation to some of the underutilized ones. We talked about Expedition already, so you don't necessarily have to go into it, as well as the state of Breach. Breach feels notably like the one people are enjoying the most. Do you feel like that one's overtuned? And the other one, I mean, I don't know anyone who actually does strong boxes, so where do you want those and essences in particular, especially when it comes to the how often essences are not really rolling greater essences. Like, you don't really see greater essences very often. I actually saw more in the campaign than I have in any of my in-game maps. So I'm curious about kind of league mechanics as it ties into in-game in particular.
Yeah, I mean, look, we just need to do a lot of balance here, and that's really all it is. And that, once again, just comes down to the relative lack of testing that in-game had before launch compared to other content. So yeah, there's just a lot of balance to do here.
It was meant to be more that essences, strong boxes, and like precursor artifacts are like the things you find that you can't anticipate coming. I understand you can spec into them, that is a thing, but it's meant to be more like a thing you find that you don't know is coming, whereas the I know we refer to them all as leagues, but like, let's say the ritual, expedition, etc., the ones you know are coming and that you're investing into. So you have these two categories where you have the ones you are adding and investing into, and then you have the other ones that are meant to be more exciting random finds. And it's safe to say, obviously, you know, there are so many essences that finding non-greater essences isn't giving you that dopamine, especially in in-game. And finding a strong box is like anti-dopamine right now, because it just makes you feel bad.
Fucking annoying.
You're like, oh,
you guys sit there and wait for it,
and you just want to run away. So look, it's safe to say that those failed at achieving that goal, hence why we have to make some improvements to them for sure. But I want to make sure that there's those two layers of things, where one's the stuff you predict is coming, you can see the icons, you can apply them with the you know, there's the base types of the precursor tablets to apply, and then you have the things where it's like, I hope I find an essence, because it's like, I hope I get the good one that's worth, you know, way too many of those divine orbs. So yeah, having both layers is important. So yeah, and we'll continue to add ones at that upper level that get a tablet, and then we'll continue to add ones that are more at that random find excitement in the map that you don't know is coming. Because you don't want to put it all on one layer where you know everything that's coming necessarily, because then nothing is exciting. And you can do exciting within that to some degree, but not always.
I mean, really it all is to say that like there are some of these that just aren't as good as the others, and we just have to improve them. But what I will say is that the breach monster density is probably a little on the high side. Like, it's actually to the point, by the way, where like we get a bunch of error messages in the logs for failing to spawn monsters in breach, because they're packed so tightly together that they don't even spawn anymore. So there's actually like there's an issue there that we have to do something about.
Hundreds.
So
actual hundreds of error logs of just like cannot fail to place monster due to lack of space.
So like that there was a joke if we could release reduce breach monster density by 20%, and the players wouldn't even see it, because it would just result in less error messages for us. So, you know, like there are actually some stuff that needs to be sorted out there. But we don't want what I don't want is people to feel like, oh, we're just like nerfing that into the ground or something like that. We definitely don't want to do that. But some of the other league mechanics just need some addressing to make them as better. And they just need to be better.
I think it'd be cool if they
it'll
added
just
more
come down to
bosses.
us like experiencing them and seeing if they suck, we'll improve them. And like right now, I know that Strongbox has got the most improvement in this patch, and I know Essence has got like at least some adjustment to make them a little bit less crap. And there's probably a few more adjustments.
That's more about the combat than the itemization. That's something we still need to look into.
Right. So there's just stuff like, we just need to improve all that stuff until it's good, right? Simple as that, really.
Fair enough.
I just want
bosses.
How
do you guys feel about the progression of players entering into mapping, going from map tier 1 to you're doing tier 16s, and then into pinnacle bossing? How do you feel like the pacing in there? They give you, one reason I bring it up is in PoE 1, we have like the quest invite version of boss fights that will happen at different iterations, so you probably know where I'm going with
so we're not really happy with how that is right now. Like, we're not happy with how the quest. The quests that effectively we give you are just like do X many of tier Y maps. And honestly, like, we can do a lot better. That's kind of a larger. It's something that I would have loved to be able to just solve instantly, but like it does need some more work. And I think there's a few different areas of this. So one of them is that like just the way the progression feels just isn't as good as PoE 1 in some way. That's kind of slightly hard to define. Like in terms of just like the feeling of like the progress you're making just isn't quite right. So I think we need to do more. Like there might be some changes we have to make to how the Atlas works to make that better.
Certainly want some bosses between those points.
Yeah. Like it just needs more of a feeling
I don't mean
of
random ones. I mean like actual ones. Still along a series of objective-driven kind of narrative-involved things where you're getting your. It's still an end game, not pinnacle. Boss at tier 6 and maybe at tier 11, and they're the quest versions, and you're doing those, and then maybe there's Uber versions.
Kind of like Shaper,
There just needs to be more going on with regard to how that progression feels. So that's one element. So the next one is that the tutorialization of the end game is not really there. Like we need to do more around this so that like it actually sort of eases you into end game a little bit better. As far as like if you're a new player, like we kind of just throw you in the deep. Like we fixed a lot of things about the introduction to the game through the campaign, but then you get to end game and it's kind of like we don't really do enough to kind of really ease you in there, I would say.
Fucking exactly.
And then I did have a third point, but I can't remember what it was now. There was something about that. Oh yeah, that's right. And it sort of ties in a little bit to what I was. This kind of was covered a little bit with what Mark was saying just a second ago. But like the way that you progress through the tiers, like you can go through the tiers too quickly, and then you kind of get left behind with like what rewards you should be getting, and like in order for us to fix that, we kind of need to make each tier more meaningful with regard to what you have to do there and what's going on. So there'll probably just be more there at endgame just to kind of make it feel like more of a progression and more of a and that can include more storyline elements and more things like that. There just needs to be more, basically, just there to make that progression feel better. The game does take a bit of a turn suddenly when you get to endgame of like it doesn't really feel like it really does feel very different. From campaign to end game, and as I said, it's just a matter of sort of easing that transition, making that a little bit better and smoothing out that more for sure.
I want to hone into 2 points here, because you talk about it feels like a different game, sort of a different sense of progression at least. We have to go from campaign into action. This is a question we're going to ask Claire, but it seems a good time to ask it now. Is that intended, and do you like that as a design principle? Because I've seen people say that they really like the campaign, and me myself, I like the difference, but I've seen people state that they really enjoy the campaign pacing, then they get to maps and they feel like it starts blasting, it's almost a different game at that point. So I think the audience would love to know how you feel about that difference.
You do actually, you do need to get to the point at some point where you feel incredibly powerful. However, I would say that there is like a bit of a switch flip right now that's kind of not quite right. Like there's definitely something that ain't right going on there.
Well, there's two. There is the character power side. I mean, a lot of people are getting to endgame. Excuse me. A lot of people are getting to endgame and they aren't just becoming gods all of a sudden, right? A lot of people are struggling and falling off and can't sustain maps and are dying. And it's not like you get to endgame and all of a sudden you're ultra powerful.
By the way,
but you certainly a lot of people are getting to endgame and then are just lost as to what to do. Right? Like a lot of players really like to be told exactly here's what you do, here's what you do, here's what you do, here's your next objective, here's the thing to look forward to. And something just like complete 10 tier 1 maps is not a fun objective, right? That's 13. Just like, okay, sure, I'll do that. Where we could do that a lot better, right? Go to this place, travel here, do this exact thing, discover this, do a tower, run this breach, all these things we can have obviously way better objectives and ones that we could still design. And you're getting your passive points for each, and you're like, okay, the next thing it wants me to do is this exact thing, not just, I've completed my 10, now it just wants me to complete tier 2 maps. I see. I'll just keep going. Sure. So there's no like, whereas the campaign's very story is like, go kill this boss, get here, and you got NPCs talking to you and everything. And then all of a sudden it's just, now I'm killing stuff, ticking up this ticker. Yeah. And, a lot of people probably aren't really getting into, based on the tutorialization, they're not really getting into the towers, the tablets, all of that stuff. And then they're just also possibly finding it a bit too hard and they're dying. And so, it's not, is friendly to the people who, especially non-PoE1 players, it's not as friendly to them as we would want it to be at all. That being said, like, obviously, there is also the capacity at that point to just be like, all right, I'm going to change my build to do this or go do this, and now I'm just, like, obliterating everything everywhere. And you don't have all those, like, story events breaking up your flow of gameplay. It's just, like, map, kill everything, map, kill everything, map, kill everything, which people love. But yes, for those who know how to do that, that happens too soon. And for those who don't know how to do it, they're like getting stuck in a hole and finding themselves very lost. So, 2 sets of improvements. The people that are going to obliterate everything, they're going to have their fun no matter what. Yeah. They'll get there a bit later, sure, if that's how you want to think about it. But it's way more important to not just have that like very much narrative-driven change in pace where all of a sudden it's just like, and it's gone. And now you're just doing, kind of random stuff. What am I supposed to do next kind of thing? And So yeah, there's a lot going wrong there. More content would do it, more time on it, more quests, more, But again, PoE1 had a lot of this stuff, and it had so many different axes. If you didn't like one thing, you could do another. If you didn't like that, you could do another, and you could do certain things earlier or later.
Like
we just need to get to that point where there's just more better, without overcomplicating everything.
So my last follow-up to this in-game topic, and I'll send over the guys to continue the conversation elsewhere. So you mentioned that there's a little bit of a separation from what I'm hearing about people like know how the blast, like they're going to go anyway, right? They're going to crush through and destroy it. Then you have the people that are like kind of learning the game, getting into the game that might like get stuck and lost. How do you feel about the, one pour though? Then now that the game has been out of the wild, does the one pour though feel like it's widening that gap and punishing players who maybe are learning the game too much?
Sucks dick.
But it's the people who are going to blast regardless. It doesn't matter because they're not going to be dying consistently in maps. So how do you feel about one pour though state of mapping currently, as well as XP loss still being fairly significant, 15%. Even though in the previous interview was stated that you don't feel like you need to have the XP loss as much, considering you do have that one pour though defense. We're in a state where we currently have both of them.
So first of all, we did discuss quite a lot about whether or not we want to go back on one portal or not, and I think that it comes down to the fact that I think that it just would really not feel the same if like the whole death actually mattering thing. I think is actually important. Like I think we sort of decided we discussed we were talking about the pinnacle boss thing. Obviously, the discussion came up of okay, should we just be allowing 6 portals everywhere? Should we be allowing checkpoints everywhere? And I think we ultimately decided we really don't want to go that way if possible. So we're going to try and that's kind of where we came to well, first we'll try with this pinnacle stuff. We'll make sure that that's something because that's actually something we've got true economic value that you need to actually preserve.
This is logical.
So it matters a lot more. The amount of time it takes you to get there and everything that matters. But I think if then to me, I feel like to be a game, you have to have some level of failure being possible. And the 6 portal thing, to me, it just never really led to a situation where you felt like you really could fail in the same way. So yeah, I'm not really a fan. I much prefer the whole one death thing.
My Warloop build it did.
As for XP penalty, part of the thinking around that is that it's kind of keeping you in the place where you're supposed to be as far as if you're dying all the time, then you're probably not ready to keep going up the power curve. But I mean, maybe that's the wrong way to look at it. I'm not sure. I don't know if you've got any different thoughts about this.
If you're dying, right now there's too many penalty axes. So if you are dying all the time, you're not going to get maps, and thus you're not going to go anywhere. And you also it's kind of like an add insult to injury. You're also now just not leveling. So
but you do have to have it. So
I agree. I think there's a few axes, and I think they're just a bit too severe when all combined together.
Yes.
Combined with, I also think that the very start of maps is just too difficult. I think we should ease into that a little bit. So bring that down a bit and then ramp the difficulty up. Well, I mean, we could hit the same spot, but I think it's just a little bit, and I think that's mostly due to the number of rare monsters and the obviously monster combinations. Because you can kind of avoid bosses, and I don't mind. I think that's a little bit of a different situation, but you get all these monsters you haven't seen in ages, and they all combine together, and so you have to kind of, generally when you go into those areas, you learn what the monsters are doing and how they're combining, and then you maybe die once or twice if you're not, ultra powerful. And then you get into maps, and you're immediately sprung on heaps of different monster permutations, and they're doing things, and you're getting killed all the time, and there's a lot to learn. You do the next map, and you're like, well, I can't take the learnings of that previous map and apply it to this next map because it's a whole different set of monsters.
Fucking exactly, bro.
So there's nothing to really take from one map to another aside from just maybe playing a bit more carefully or not being so overzealous and whatnot. So it's just a little bit difficult there, and I suspect we need to bring down the difficulty a little bit and ease people into it a bit more.
He's right about everything.
But I need to think about it certainly a lot more and actually see...
He completely
get a little more
understands
analytics on it as well, and actually see what the actual problems are. And again, I read a lot more feedback. Honestly,
sure.
It would be nice if there was a way to deal with the fact that. So I mean, the penalty for not clearing a map. We remove the extra content.
Yes.
From the map, and it would be nice if you could just spend another map and still be able to do that content, but unfortunately that isn't possible. So for example, if you failed on the boss, then you just spend another map and then you can fight the boss again and do that whole thing, right? That would be nice if that was the case. But unfortunately, we can't do that because it would open up too many economic abuse things where like you fail the map intentionally because you want to farm the items to the rest of the area. So it's very difficult for us to come up with a solution, like, because I really would prefer that, honestly. It'd be nice if we were able to come up with a solution that would allow you to redo content by spending an extra map without having to like have all the problems that being able to rerun a single map would actually cause. So yeah, like I sort of wish I could come up with a thing for that.
I personally want to keep the one portal and adjust the other axes and see how that plays out.
I really think that's a mistake.
Before compromising on the one portal. But yeah.
I really think it's a mistake.
It certainly is the case. We have discussed this so many times. Like, it's come up, and before we released it, it's like people are going to definitely complain about this, and we're like, we know, and we haven't found the solution.
It's a common question. Had to ask. Yeah, I understand.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So now there's a lot more people. Well, now there's a lot more feedback, and a lot more people. It's much easier for us to get the specifics on how we could get it right. Like, for sure. Not to say it's now trivial to do. It's still hard. But there's a lot more information there for us to be able to, take less of a shot in the dark, so to speak. So I would expect some changes.
We'll have to wait and see. So we're cutting it a little bit tighter because we have a lot of questions. So I'm going to try to speed run as much as we can because there is a section that I care very much about.
No,
it's minions. So let's get there, okay? Let's just dive into it. And we're going to talk about ailments, damage with time effects. We're talking about ignite. We're talking about dots like poison, for example. So the question is, what's your feelings around it on a hit, as it scales on hit, opposed to its dot scaling, which we have a bit different scaling in PoE1, because now it's based off the actual hit you're doing, which was taken away from PoE1. So what's the reasoning behind this, and what's your thoughts on it?
Now that one.
Well, I can't remember the history of PoE1 too much, but I understand the difference. I mean, I personally prefer that the heavier the hit, the more the dot. The issue we run into is, of course, then you just get... It's either balanced around the extremely hard heavy hitters and everything else can't really scale them currently. And then you get into the thing, or you go down the PoE1 route where it's a bunch of skills have ailment penalties and a bunch of them don't, and that more normalizes it so you can play any skill to do the dots. I would say I prefer the asymmetry where it's like, here are the skills that are generally better. The problem is, I'd say that's, again, I mentioned the bleed Hammer of the Gods thing earlier, where it's just now the bleed one-shots the monster, and, you get into that kind of situation. So there's a whole bunch of balance here to get right, but I don't want it to just be like, well, implicitly, I don't want it to be like you can play any build and bleed. You should have to have some combinations, and there's more mechanics and more things we need to add, or more unique items and all of that stuff.
Specifically,
it's tricky because generally speaking, when we're doing first pass balance things, I really like to avoid... I like the bumpiness where we've got like different skills being better at different things. And I really don't like it when we end up in a situation like, for example, in you've got the whole like damage effectiveness on spells in PoE1, and it's like, this is a thing you do to solve a balance problem. Like, this is unrelated to ailments, but like I'm saying, it's just another example of one of those things where you like, oh, I've got this problem where these skills are sort of all out of line with each other, and so we have to do this like sledgehammer to it. We're like, okay, we're going to go and we're going to normalize everything, and I kind of hate that type of thing, and I really try to avoid it wherever we can. And it's kind of one of those annoying things where as games get, like, as you do more and more of this balance stuff, you kind of end up with more of these kind of normalization procedures that go on. And so it's nice if we can find ways to avoid it if we can. And that's kind of why I like to try and pitch everything. Like, we started in PoE2 with a lot of things having, like, going back on a lot of those sort of normalization procedures we did from PoE1. And ideally, we would be able to find different solutions that don't involve having to do that. It's... one of those things that I worry we might still having to do some of that stuff in order to fix problems, but ideally we can avoid it, and that's kind of why we went back on some of those normalization procedures for PoE2.
So one point, just real quick here about bleeding in particular, because you're talking about bleeding. Since you can't bleed on energy shield, bleeding style element builds are basically disabled against energy shield types of mobs. So feelings on that? Is that something that's just like, well, that's as intended?
Can't bleed on energy shield.
Oh, that's a good question.
You can, unless you're breaking the energy shield.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a really good question. That's narrow too.
I thought that
I don't think that's even true.
I thought that the thing with bleed was it's supposed to bypass energy shield.
No, it doesn't.
It does, but you can only apply a bleed if the hit deals damage to the life pool. So if you're playing CI, you're essentially immune to poison, care, and bleed.
I will take your word for that, but if that is how that works, that is not how that is meant to work.
Yeah,
I only say this because yesterday I heard someone upstairs talking about this and going like, people are just wrong. You can apply bleed to energy shielded. Look,
I actually don't know about this.
And then I was like, okay, but I'll confirm that after this. And look, if that is how that works, that is like
bleed was actually supposed to be like an anti-mage mechanic, not a like.
Wait, what do you mean anti-mage mechanic?
Shield, so
well,
that was kind of the idea.
That's fucking racist.
And I'm wrong. Then Quinn has thrown me under the bus. Because I asked that question.
Hey, he did the same thing to me too today.
Again,
we could easily be wrong. Like, it's amazing
it
how...
also could be that it has been changed internally and not yet externally. That is another thing also.
Hey.
Like, someone may have fixed this 2 weeks ago and we never got it live or something. Who knows? Like, I'll look into it. It's not meant to work that way.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Moving forward here, we are on elements. And now we are into ascendancy swapping. It's the next topic here. So these are kind of going back to conversations we've had previously in interviews where you guys were debating it and you wanted to see after the launch of the game, where do we stand?
Yeah.
Personally, I still like not being able to swap. I know no one will like that hot take. And there are plenty of other developers here, and I remember even pitching it, and I was like, is this your hill to die on? Is this what you believe? But that being said, I still prefer that decision being ultra important, and I prefer that decision being locked in. But it's one of those ones that's really hard to rationalize why it's better one way or the other, to be honest. Like, it wouldn't be that hard to actually convince me the otherwise, because it is not the hill I would die on, that's for damn sure.
Okay.
But so I don't know. It's like,
in my opinion,
my preference.
That's like a tier 9
I don't know why I have my
problem in the
preference
game.
that way. I guess I just like more decisions, especially about characters, to be a bit more final. But that being said, we have re-speaking of everything else. I don't know. I don't really know where we're going to go with this one, aside from like, sure, we'll reevaluate it and we'll see.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, we have a lot of developers that feel very strongly, and then we feel one way, and we discuss it with those people, and we kind of see where we land. But like, we're not going to ignore, the opinions and preferences of our team, either our design team and whatnot. Just to overrule it, just because. That being said, I sit on one side of that fence for sure, that probably the majority of players do not sit on.
I mean, I'm 55% in favor of re-rolling ascendancies personally, so it's very hard for me to argue against it when I would say that I would allow it. But I'm also, once again, like, other people on the team feel more strongly.
Make a paywall.
I mean, what I would be open to is like
spend like $50.
I understand you have to go online to have a look at what those ascendancy classes are, but I would be more open to having in-game things where when you're creating your character,
500.
I don't want to not in a way that wouldn't overcomplicate it for new players, where they're like, what are all these? What are ascendancy classes? What's going on here?
I'm not really in favor of that argument personally, because I don't think that you are equipped at the point of the start of the game to be able to assess what the ascendancy classes are. So I don't really think that really holds water.
At least for new players, I guess. But then again, experienced players already know how to get that information.
Right. He's totally.
I don't know the right solution there, honestly, but
right.
you can bet it's going to come up in discussions another 55 times this year. So
surely we're just at the start of it. Again, we don't want to take too much of your time.
Mark. No, I think Mark was right about the deaths.
Questions, and the first one here is: given the current TTK, the time to kill, of pinnacle bosses by many of the stronger builds in the game, I guess the question is, what is the goal for build power? Is one-shotting pinnacle bosses an intended power level for builds, or is it intended to assign something else?
No, you should be able to one-shot.
It should definitely not be the case that the first time you fight a pinnacle boss that you one-shot it. Like, that's the kind of thing that maybe you can get to after crazy amounts of like extra items being found, but you shouldn't be doing that the first time you play it. So it's not right. And that's just, there's some builds that are outrageous. And
Devs arguing on
we want to actually make it so the boss can use their abilities. That's why we spend a bunch of time making them, after all.
Exactly.
So,
when you first get there and you're kind of relatively equipped for it, it shouldn't like it should still be a 1 to 3 minute fight kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about
reference.
1 minute of emerging. I'm talking 1 to 3 minutes of actual skill combat. Not like.
Okay. Well, that's a good time of reference we can use moving forward, knowing that's the kind of the goal going for the vision.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Next question is: given the difficulty of requirements to get the 7th and 8th ascendancy points, is this intended to be something that not all average players can acquire?
We definitely wanted the final ascendancy points to be something that was like a significant like goal. Like this is an awesome, like it's supposed to be quite a thing when you get the last 2 points. Yeah. I mean, as for an average player versus not, that's kind of hard to answer. I mean, I don't know if the average player gets halfway through maps really. So like, yeah, it sort of depends on the definition, but we wanted it to be a big thing that you get.
So map clear conditions, talking about that for a moment. Clearing rare mobs are effectively like the only real map clear condition at the moment. Is that the plans to continue that going forward, or is this sort of one of many conditions and is a placeholder, or how do you guys feel about the map clear condition being strictly rare mob clearance?
I suspect as we get to answering the exact same thing we talked about before with the more objective driven and learning and tutorialization, we'll probably expand on that. The ideal world is there'd be a whole, a nice cool set of different things you're doing in each map that isn't just killing all the rares, but actually a surprisingly large amount of work to do those and to do them well. Otherwise, you just end up with this thing where it's like, oh, I like this one, but these other 4 are terrible, and I keep randoming into those.
You don't want bad ones of these, and killing the monsters is at least something that you already want to do. So that's kind of part of the reason why we sort of went with that in the end.
So
there's certainly more work.
How about maybe if there's like a boss in the map
currently is gated basically behind pinnacle boss progression,
and then you kill the boss.
Have a question is in clear conditions,
and then it finishes the map.
To be mandated in the same moving forward, or are you guys looking to add in more iterations of progression on the Atlas tree outside the pinnacle boss clear?
What?
We did discuss changing how the core of the Atlas progression is, but as for the actual pinnacle, like as for the individual league trees, I think we were still keen to sort of have that be the kind of extra stuff that you really get at the end of that
to get
thing.
The pinnacle boss's tree, it should be killing the pinnacle boss. We want to keep that for sure. And for each of the contents. But I want to upgrade the core Atlas tree for sure. I think it's quite boring and flat right now.
Yeah, they can.
There's not a lot going on there. And part of that is to do with as we add more content, it will make it more interesting. But there's certainly a better job we can do of that. And how you acquire the points, again, getting away from that grind and getting into more like, all right, like do this 2 points, do this 2 points, do this 2 points, not grind this 2 points, grind this 2 points for the actual core tree. For the sub-trees, for the leagues, I actually do like them being behind that. But ideally, each league would then have its own meta system within it to amplify itself in some way, which we don't currently have a lot of. So it's something we'd be looking into in the future when we're upgrading the existing content as opposed to adding new content.
All right. I bet all of our chats have been spamming this, so I'm just going to throw it out right away.
All right, let's get it.
Map tab when?
Ooh, good question.
That should be reasonably soon, shouldn't it?
Yeah, it's an as soon as possible thing. We've got people working on it right now.
Yeah.
As soon as it's done, you'll have it. Like, it was not a...
It'll be done soon.
We wanted it there for release.
Okay.
Done soon.
Great. All right. Well, awesome.
Let's go to tech questions, optimizations, and bugs, kind of a little category we have.
Even more.
I'm going to do some mini questions for you guys as well. Appreciate you guys taking the time. I know we're going a little bit above the time here. First question we have is something you talked about in a previous interview, I believe, with the Cicerin. It was predictive network mode and lockstep. What is the reasoning behind this specific topic, or what's your take on it, seeing how people are performing right now?
These are two different modes.
I actually haven't hugely investigated this, to be honest. I don't know if you've got any more information about that.
I do not.
Yeah.
I mean, we just have lockstep right now.
Oh, the predictive's just not... it's not
we only have lockstep currently.
Okay. Well, we just need to fix that, right? Honestly, the people who would be working on that have not even come back from break yet, so that's just not something that we've got. But we do need to get that working.
Okay.
I think it was just disabled mostly out of caution, right? Because we just expected lots of shit would be broken.
There was a few things. I can't remember exactly what they were.
But we need to get it sorted.
There were some things that didn't work in that mode, and we had to re-engineer them.
Yeah.
And no time.
Yeah, we'll get to it though.
Okay, a couple just real quick optimization type of questions here. Terrain obstruction is something that has been helped a little bit in this recent, we saw in the video there, you guys were talking about making it a little bit more clear and transparent. But some things like trees, for instance, covering your screen from the overhead, etc.
Yeah.
Do you have any feelings on how terrain obstruction is currently in the game? And is there any plans around making this a little bit
it's just a matter of individual work on each individual thing, just like looking at each doodad and being like, what the bounds need to be, that kind of thing.
That some trees don't fade out until you're like intersecting with them,
Sure.
and it's annoying because you get more, and the faster you move, the more you will be obscured, and so there's some timing changes, there's some proximity changes, there's
just a matter of individual balance things
to be addressed.
There's still some areas.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then as far as optimization is concerned, I mean, we'll just keep working on it, right? I mean, in the background, you've got the engine guys working on things. There is one very annoying crash that is very, very hard to debug that happens on, I believe it only happens on NVIDIA cards.
I haven't had
where,
any
like,
crashes.
after sort of an hour or
actually,
an
I think
hour
I
and a
had
half
like
kind of
one.
thing, you'll get a crash to desktop.
That was about it.
And it's been very, very difficult to track down, and we're adding more debug stuff. In fact, I think there'll be a patch. If we can't work it out internally, we'll actually probably eventually make a patch where we tell people to like turn on a command line flag that will enable extra debug information, because the thing that will allow us to debug this does reduce frame rates by like 5%. So we might actually ask people to like, hey, turn this on until we find the problem, and then it'll reduce your frame rates a little bit, but it'll help us track it down. And then once we've got that, then we should be able to work it out. Effectively, they're like concurrency bugs within the GPU. But annoyingly, we were also told that the next version, like NVIDIA told us that the next version of the NVIDIA driver does make the crash go away. But then they also said that they didn't know why that was the case. So I don't know if we can 100% rely on that either. So there's something weird going on that's like quite hard to track down going on here. And hopefully we can work it out soon. But we just need more debug information. It's very hard to track down, unfortunately. And it's kind of annoying how it takes so long to reproduce. Like there's even a thing where like the first hour after we do a restart patch, we don't get any of those crashes because it literally takes more than an hour to reproduce. And then after that, they start coming in. So there's like something weird going on there. But it's the most common crash, and like we're just like really annoyed. It's just very annoying to deal with.
Thanks for the answer, because that was a very common question. People were talking about crashes and wanted to ask you about it. So
I hardly had any crashes.
All we have
maybe
left
like one or two.
Some minion questions from Ghazi, just a couple of them, and then we're into the rapid fire portion, and then we're pretty much done. So try to get you out of here.
All right, let's get it.
It's going, Ghazi.
Sure.
Let's just dive into the nitty gritty.
Why can't
let's talk
they
about
go through a
Hodor.
wall?
Minion body blocking in doorways.
Yeah, why can't they go through doors?
Let me just add the word, come on.
They're
so, I mean, like this is something that we need to work out a better solution for. Like what I can say is that, okay, so people will immediately say, oh, just make it so that minions can just walk through each other. And it's like, we've done that and it sucked. And it doesn't just suck because of that it looks bad or something. Like it sucks to actually, like, it actually just makes the minions play worse. So we need to find another solution that's like smarter somehow that like fixes that issue. One thing we are planning on doing, just as an initial test that we've got, I believe someone's doing at the moment, is at least making it so that when minions die due to distance, that they respawn immediately near your character rather than it waiting till the next refresh. So like that'll at least maybe help a bit, but I don't know if it's like the full solution by any means. But there's something we have to do around this, but I honestly don't know quite what it is yet. And as I said, like all of the obvious solutions, as you might say, we have tried and they weren't great. So it really is going to take something a little bit more complicated to do to like work out what we're doing here. But yes, I appreciate the issue for sure. Like I'm not saying that we're not going to do something about it because we have to. I'm just saying that like it's not clear yet what that is. And at the very least, in the meantime, we can do the respawn instantly upon timing on the distancing out. Which will help a little bit maybe. But more needs to be done.
It's one of the big problems people complain about with
for sure.
I've had that happen myself
rubber banding
a lot.
to you resurrecting is much better than them dying, because that is part of my other question I had here.
Yeah.
However, in Theory 1,
you get
there's
too
a
far away,
feature
they die.
added as a modifier on
And not
well-telegraphed possibilities that you're supposed to, as a player, dodge where your minions can't because you can't control them, so they do less damage to them. Theory 2 doesn't seem to have this based on the data mine I've been checking.
I think they have some,
which seems
but not
to
a
be
whole
that
lot.
they're just expected to literally just die, and then you have to sit there and wait for them to resurrect. What's the reasoning for not giving us convocation, which would also assist in the whole minion body blocking doorways and tight corridors?
Yeah, just give us convoke. That'd be a good idea.
Are there not minion things in the AI? We did do some of that.
Not that I've seen.
They didn't even know.
This, I can't remember the exact AI.
No, I mean the damage.
From a damage perspective, not hugely, no. We were tinkering around with this whole expectation of like, how often, if you have like no investment and all this, how often are your minions supposed to be permanent minions, supposed to be dead versus alive? And then what are the things you can do to keep them alive? Because it was meant to be more in order to have your minions, otherwise they're never dead, right? They're permanently alive, and then the DPS is you just running around doing whatever you're doing.
My minions
And
never
so
die now.
that is really the issue, just to be clear, is that if we make it so that boss abilities aren't killing your minions, then that means that that would effectively mean your minions would just never die. So then what's the...
It was meant to be more of active, what are you doing to keep them alive actively?
The convoke,
and we haven't got that right. Like, for sure, we haven't got that
so,
right.
all right, there's
so like, I guess Bone Offering was meant to be one of those examples of like boss slams coming, and then, but also then you got a multi-thread, you got about how do I survive and how do I do this at the same time. So there's certainly something going wrong there where we haven't, and I believe there's probably still a lot of boss abilities that just haven't been tuned correctly with respect to, you know, again, how often they're killing certain minions versus not. Because there will be things, I'm assuming, that are just completely unavoidable and they just wipe out your entire minion thing. And then it's like, well, what was I even supposed to do? So the problem is, as soon as you get into this build, the level of like detail that you have to do, where you not only have to, sure, there might be some system change, and it's easy to probably do a cop-out that's just like, whatever. You know, it's actually the right answer is to go through every single boss and test them and go through monsters and go through mods, and like it's a huge amount of detail and it takes quite a long time. We have people like kind of actively providing that more specific feedback, and we are iterating on it. But there's still certainly a handful of things we need to do. Otherwise, I'd say that blocking the doorways is a more catastrophic problem for sure, like where they just like can't get through.
Well, the fact that they don't rubber band
and they're like
die.
running off screen and them dying. So like we're focusing more on that stuff first, and then we'll probably get back to the boss specific balance with respect to how often certain skills are just wiping out all your minions and you know all of that.
I think having a convoke
I
is
understand
important.
the idea that the bosses are supposed to kill them. The problem is when a boss leaves a damage over time effect on them, they kill a bunch of them, your timer starts ticking, and then the dot kills the next one, it resets, and then it kills the next one, it resets. You just have to wait for all of them to die, and now you're sitting there doing nothing. You feel like you're in a wheelchair, not able to run around. But an instant use convocation could be a solution to that, which would help with the whole body blocking. A lot of people
I think they should just add convocation back.
Give this convocation, and I'm in that category as well.
I think just get it back.
The other question, to not waste too much time, and that is a very interesting question. What is the reasoning behind making the minion's movement speed a direct replicator copy of what you have as a player, including when you get a minion movement speed debuff reduction on yourself?
So me and Mark were actually quite surprised to learn that when you get a debuff on your character, that it causes your minions to slow down.
Yeah, it's not intended.
That was not intentional, and so we'll just fix it.
We'll just change that.
Yeah, we'll just fix it. That was not a thing we even realized was the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next one is tooltip is a bit wonky with the minions, with it being incorrect in cases, especially accuracy actually being very wildly off.
I don't even know what
100% chance to hit, it's not hitting, and then the tooltip is missing altogether on things like rating spirits. And sometimes when you change a gem on an unrelated ability, suddenly your tooltip on your damaged minions is also changing randomly. Is this something
that
you've
sounds like a bug to me?
Yeah, we'll fix that as soon as
I just need to look into what's going on.
Our developer responsible, well, they might be back today, but our developer responsible for that has still been on holiday. So as soon as they're back, they'll get onto fixing them.
Yeah. There was quite a lot of rushed, like description stuff happening right at the end of development there. So I'm sure there's even more stuff that's wrong than that. Just like with that stuff.
I'm surprised that tooltip stuff is as good as it is. Given, like, I remember 2 weeks before release, I was like, "This is a dead feature. Like, it may as well not exist." And then all of a sudden, it was at least something that I was like, "Okay, that's a pretty good effort on what they did." So there's just more to do, though, of course.
I got plenty more minion questions, but I'm just gonna go with the one that's been spammed the most, and that's Spectres when.
Yeah.
So soon, fairly soon.
Great.
It took more work than we expected, actually.
Awesome.
Like, there was just a lot of there was a lot of specific shit we have to do, but it won't be. Perfect. It's not too far away.
Well, the designers have to go through, all the monster designers have to go through and make spectrable versions of every monster.
Yeah.
Which in PoE 1 was a lot easier, and in PoE 2, there is so much more manual designer-based scripting on like a monster-to-monster basis that we have to take out all of that random stuff to do with dialogue and because you don't want to all of a sudden have a spectre come out and then you're like it dies and your character says some random thing and because all of a sudden now your character's just spamming random dialogue all the time and
But there was even stuff that's kind of stupid where it's like, oh, the idle animation of this monster is loud. And so if you've got it as a Spectre, then like it makes it too annoying. And like just there's all sorts of random stuff that happens when you turn things into a Spectre that's kind of not obvious.
Effectively, every single monster has to be.
Yes, of course. That's true.
Well, we don't want to repeat those same problems, right?
So
ideally, the audio team actually gets time to do proper Spectre mastering, so to speak, on all their audio for all the monsters. But no, I believe the designers are almost done with their part, which means it's then just audio and then a whole metric, which has been happening in parallel, but a whole metric ton of balance testing to make sure that we're not just, I mean, which is a lot, by the way. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong with these things.
Well, balancing the spirit cost of each of these.
Yeah, that's going to be ridiculous.
Testing it with every array of support gems.
That's...
And, monsters can be set up kind of jank, where you're like, that's like a projectile, but like it's using some other skill that's kind of actually like triggering projectiles. And so if you actually put, multiple projectiles on it, might not affect it in the way you think.
Making a whole new class.
Like from a damage perception of like, I take less damage from projectiles, that's fine. From an avoidance perspective, it's fine. But then there'll be some weird thing where, because, with like player skills, we actually code every single skill, like, exactly here's how it's meant to work. It's like quite intricate. With monsters, we're cowboys. We just go ballistic and just set them up to make sure that they're good. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, right, we had to make a Spectre of this. Okay, well, and then you have to hack a bunch of stuff together. But, it's also what allows us to be able to make a ludicrous amount of monsters all the time. But yes, now you have to make Spectres of all of them, which is... You're almost done. We've almost caught up to where we were, so I'd say, soon, whatever soon means.
Not too far.
All right, so we are in the last portion. 5 minutes, some rapid fires. We'll fit whatever we can in within this 5 minutes, and we're done at this point. Thanks for going 10 minutes over at this point. So
that's all right.
I'm just going to pick random ones here. Search feature on an atlas, so you can search like
yep, we definitely should have that. This was something we even said before we even released, but we just never got time to do. But yeah, we'll do that at some point.
Got it.
On the list.
Tornado Bird in the game for Ultimatum is the hardest boss in the entire game. In my opinion, personally.
I believe that's resolved, and 011 does have changes to that
Bird.
one, I believe.
He's ridiculous.
I saw it on the list. I saw it on the patch notes.
All right.
Yeah, I just can't remember what skills.
It was the tornado. Like it was more avoidable or something. There was some stuff. It is in the specific boss balance that got addressed in this.
We'll see after the patch, and then we'll make more changes if needed. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so Auction House. We're getting spammed about this all the time. You've answered many questions. How are your guys' feelings about an Auction House or in-game purchasing or buyout on the website or anything related to that?
It's a nope, right?
I've talked about what we could do before. I don't have anything to announce right now.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll discuss this more. I'm sure this will come up again.
Yeah.
Sure. Accessibility question. Red-green color blindness is the most common in the world. It's my understanding. Yeah. Obviously, red on green is a very common thing within Path of Exile 2, specifically in Ultimatum, which is a mandated ascendancy trial. So
is Christmas ableist?
Any plans around accessibility features for this?
Well, effectively, that's usually what we do for this stuff. Is rather than having a mode for it, we tend to just make sure that each thing, like we test it on people who are actually colorblind. So I just need to get probably Reese to just test all the stuff specifically, because I know he's red-green colorblind, and just make sure that they're actually distinguishable. I generally prefer rather than having modes for it to like have
people with that colorblindness highlighting the area. So Ultimatum, as you said, being bad gives us a target, and we'll start someone there.
Yeah.
Sure. Speaking of visibility, rare and blue mobs. Can't really tell they're rare and blue mobs, or magic mobs, I should say. There's no highlight on them like in PoE1. You know how there's like a little highlight around them? So you can't.
So the intention is that you can tell when a monster is based on the effect of the actual thing itself. There might be some cases where we're just not being successful in that regard, and so we just need to improve it.
We're going to do more there, and we are going to try some things that give them magic and rare identifiers that aren't. The glows just really took you out of the, like when you're in a dark dungeon and you're exploring it, like just,
and honestly,
what the heck is this glowing beacon of light over here?
I just wish Fresnel glow was just banned in games generally. Like it's just everyone just relies on it. Like, oh, we need to make this more visible. Add a Fresnel glow to it. Like it's just this freaking it's cancer in games generally. Sorry, this is just a random side rant from me, but I just hate the fact that everyone lazily goes to Fresnel glow and freaking everything.
Wow, does that?
Last question related to visuals. So visual effects in co-op can be very difficult. You know, you got people spamming lots of shit around. Any opinions on toggling other people's visual effects, etc.?
I don't want to add an option like that, but there is probably more we can do automatically for that kind of stuff.
I think other player visual effect calling is a good idea.
There'll be some engine-based things we can do.
Yeah, there will be. There's probably more we can do, and just like that. But in my opinion, it should be automatic, and like you shouldn't even really be thinking about it. It should just happen. Yeah, like I'm not a fan of just like, oh, turn off all the effects. Like I'm just, it's kind of lame to me.
No,
fair enough.
He's right.
Disenchanting flasks for quality. They're one of the things you can't salvage in the game currently in order to get like the quality bobbles back that you'll be able to do on flasks.
Right.
Is this intended?
Is there really any reason why we shouldn't do that? I know you were like, oh, it's because it doesn't thematically fit with a hammer on a bench. Just smash the glass.
I mean, I think that's why it is.
Exposing him?
I have nothing against adding it.
Yeah. We can probably change that, right? Like,
I think it was more like, let's do something interesting for Flask, salvaging and crafting later and save that, but we can add it.
We should just add it. I have no problem with adding it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we should probably nerf the drop rate of Flask slightly. High levels. That's just a random note that I was thinking about yesterday as I was picking up tons of flasks. Random side note. But
We've almost got all of them. Checkpoints and maps in order to backtrack in maps.
Yes,
how do you feel about that?
Just do it.
So not for resurrecting purposes,
yeah, just for
fast travel.
It's not a terrible idea. I'd have to think a little bit about how we would position those. I'm not against it necessarily. I guess the feeling is that there's not so many like objectives in maps in the same way.
When you do those linear maps and you missed a rare monster, you want to go play something else for a while.
You're right. But, so yeah, we should probably do something about this, but I don't have an exact understanding of what we would need to do perfectly.
Sure.
Yeah.
On the table.
Mark 100%
being able to see gems without cutting. Currently, you got to cut the gem to look at the list of skills.
That's a good point.
I mean, I don't really have anything against it, but where the hell does the option go? I'll think about that. I'm not really against that.
Yeah. Maybe on the G button, top, click at all skills.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Gambler in the hideout. We have all the other vendors, but we don't have like a gambler in the hideout.
That's a good point.
It's like Alva normally does
this. For that, what was there was something very broken at the end, and we quickly turned it off. But
you
I
can't
think we just need to
gamble
fix
with a
one thing
hammer,
and then
right?
turn it back on. There was something very bad exploitation tier, and so we were just like disable. It's like 10 minutes until deployment kind of thing.
4 left, and we got through all of them. Okay, so Venom Quest is currently the only one that you can't reselect the rewards. So, for instance, you can reselect like the Titan with the life flask for the charm duration. You can't select from like chaos to attributes or whatever. Any opinions on keeping that permanent, or can we reselect?
I want to add a way to change that.
Okay.
Which I know people might be like, well, hold on, then why don't you want to allow a way to change the sentences? And the answer is I don't know. That's just how I feel. But
we'll allow you to change it.
I might feel differently later. But yes, I do want to add a way to change that for sure.
Okay,
I love
movement
this
speed
guy.
on boots. Any feelings about having them be implicit?
Oh my god!
Or, basically movement speed mandatory on boots, or else you're really slowed down.
Yeah.
So how you guys feel about moving movement speed to implicits, or do you have any feelings on movement speed on boots?
I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a problem to have a mod that's really valuable on an item that you definitely want to go for. Like, boots is certainly the case where that's like the most extreme, but I don't necessarily think it's a problem as such. So, I personally don't have a problem with it, but I don't know if you feel differently.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like having it that I think it's good.
I mean, if you added move speed implicitly to boots, would you then be like, okay, well, like IPD on weapons?
I don't think they should make it implicit.
Start to get into funny territory in some sense, right? We're like, so anyway, that's kind of our feeling on it.
Last 2, UI customization options. Is that potential?
I mean, you'd have to be more specific.
Okay. I think people just want
in
to be
general, no, like.
Yeah.
If you're looking at like
we're not going to be World of Warcraft like UI mod type there, but like if there's something specific, then you're like, I wish we could do this. Then maybe we would think about it. It's just a question of
more of a generic question I was getting. Okay, last one, boys. State of co-op and body blocking. Body blocking. You're with co-op here.
I think it's.
There's something not right about it.
There's something not right about it. I agree, but I do think you do need it. To make things feel more physical, but there is something not right about it. But there shouldn't be, considering that players are actually. No, because you know what it is? It's because we changed really, really close to the end of development the size of the player instead of changing the size of all the monsters.
Yeah.
And I think that probably results in like a situation. But there's something not right about it. But I don't want to just completely remove it. We might end up with a solution where like the size of a player to other players is different than what the size is to other monsters or something like that in order to kind of like ease it. I suspect we'll do something along those lines. It wasn't really on my radar, I have to admit, but we should do something about this. Yes.
Okay.
And you'll forgive me for asking one last question that I'm curious about myself. In terms of microtransactions coming from PoE 1 to PoE 2, do we have any cadence or quantity or any information we can give them when we're going to be seeing more of our previous purchases?
Well, the main thing is that by the time we go out of early access, we have to have all of them. As for the rate at which they come through, I mean, look, we'll try and get as many as we can and done in the near future. I honestly, so the rigging team are like busy doing that, and I haven't paid enough attention to them. I need to go catch up with them and ask them, hey, how's that job going that I see you going on?
It's probably, it turned into more work than we initially anticipated, for sure. There's like a whole bunch of effects that don't translate one to one, so there's a lot of departments that have to do a lot of work. They are tuning through it. That being said, it was certainly more complicated before when we were in that last several month or 3-4 month kind of lead up to release, and it was kind of like, okay, we need to have all hands on deck getting certain game content done, and we generally prioritize gameplay over microtransactions especially in those kind of moments. And so now it's going to ease up a bit, and we can allocate some resources, a bit more resources there to get more of them ported across. But it did end up being a little bit more work than we actually anticipated. It's not just like a copy paste job and it's done. Some things have to be kind of re-authored to actually work in one over the other. Mostly due to lighting, I suppose, really is what is the big difference.
Yeah. So I don't have an immediate cadence for you, but we should start getting them coming out, rolling out relatively soon.
All right, and I think that pretty much wraps it. I mean, we're getting spammed about Path of Exile 1's 3.26, but unless you want to talk about, bit
of a long topic to get into at this point.
Yeah. So I figured we'd throw that there, but that's it, guys. You want to wrap it up?
All right, excellent.
Let's just say thank you for coming. And, it always happens. We say 1.5 hour. It always goes above it. We very much appreciate you guys' time.
This was a marathon. How long was
going
this?
So long. But pleasure having you guys on. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And can't wait for the patch notes. And we'll see you guys very soon.
Yeah, 2.5 hours.
Thank you very much.
Bro, this is a bit.
Yeah, I want to say thank you also. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Sorry it was 20 minutes extra, but...
We don't have a clock in here. You understand? You could have said it was the right amount of time, and we wouldn't know.
Oh man, I missed my last
we
one.
don't know how long it's been.
Crazy good interview.
All right, thank you so much.
All right,
crazy good interview. Yeah, a huge W to Darth Microtransaction and Gazzy. This was really, really, really good. I think that they answered a lot of the questions that most people had. I mean, it's kind of hard to say, what really people want to hear about. I don't really know. Now, while we were doing this, I was thinking about, what is on my wish list of, things that I want in PoE 2. This is what my wish list is right now. This is, if you want to ask me, what do I think they should add into the game? These are the things that I would want to see them add into the game. Now, obviously, there's going to be a bit of discrepancy. People might not agree on every single little thing, but I do feel like with this list right here, these are the things that I think are the most important, the things that matter the most, and the things that I would want to see added into the game, the most, right? This is generally where I'm at. And so, yeah. Fuck honor. Yeah, I think that the honor system... Here's where I'm at with the honor system, okay, guys? I think that the honor system is very clearly fucked, okay? It is very clearly fucked. I think that in some cases, the best solution to a system, instead of further contriving it and making it more confusing to the player, I think the better solution is to just simply get rid of it. Stop trying to make this fit together, make it make sense within itself or anything like that. Just get rid of it. It doesn't add any gameplay. It doesn't improve the experience, in my opinion. I think that it just sucks. It's very asymmetrical for certain builds. I don't think that the balancing changes that they added achieved the goals that they wanted it to. I would just prefer that they didn't have it, right? I love the honor system. Yeah, I don't think it's very good, but yeah, the devs are stubborn about the one portal system. It feels like the devs aren't playing the game. I think they're playing the game a lot. I just think that I know why they think that about the one portal system, but this is the way that I see it. It's not about difficulty, it's about reality. The truth is that sometimes when you're playing the game, you're going to have somebody call you, you're going to have somebody say your name, something's going to happen, you're going to get a pop-up, you'll lose interest for 2 or 3 seconds, and mistakes just happen. That's life. Mistakes happen. And so, hit escape, well, sometimes you don't know what happens. Like, it's just like, oh shit, this thing distracted me instantaneously, right? Yeah, and you have a pause for this, right? Exactly, yeah, you just get distracted instantly and you don't think to pause. Like, that's it. I don't see the like, is the one portal system making the game better? No. I don't think that it improves the game or makes the game better in any tangible way. As somebody who's played a lot of PoE 2, and I've played PoE 1 for a long time, I do not think that the one portal system has improved my experience playing the game in any way, and if anything, I think that it's made it worse. That's the way I feel about it. They argued that it opens up exploitation. No, they argued that if you had to redo it, and if you... No, that was 2 separate things. Their point about exploitation was making sense. More rage quitting? Yeah. If you want one portal, just play hardcore. It's the same logic that people had with pausing. Like, there were a lot of people who didn't want you to be able to pause the game because it would allow you to, like, process the mechanics in a way that you weren't naturally attended to. Video games exist inside of real life, and I think that players make mistakes and things accidentally happen sometimes. Pop-ups happen, like somebody gets a lag spike, etc. There are just so many random events that can happen in a person's life that I just don't really see there being any value to taking away somebody's ability to get a second portal. I don't see how it makes that. Like, basically, like, I don't see any world where it makes the game better. I get that some people might like it. That's totally fine. But personally, I do not think that it makes the game better in any way. No offense, scrub take. No? What so you're bad? Like, what do you mean? I played the game for, like, thousands of hours. I'm not a scrub at the game. No. What, do you think everybody that doesn't like one portal is bad at the game? That's so stupid. That's not even the point. Like, what do you mean? Like, so anybody who disagrees with you is bad. Okay. Well, also, by the way, what do you think most players are? Do you think you should design the game and you should make features in the game that are like core functionalities of the end game? If I'm a scrub and you think that I'm bad, that, like, I would say I'm better than 90% of the people that play PoE, right? For sure, right? I know more about the game. And also, I don't know shit about the game. But compared to other people, I know a lot. It's a wannabe elitist take. Yeah, exactly. If you're making a system that is that exclusionary, it's crazy. I'm good at Path of Exile, but I like making my own shit builds that have no defense until I'm min-max, and I can't play PoE 2 with that mindset. Yeah. One portal is forcing hardcore into normies. I'm going to die. Let me go back in and die again, but one and done will kill my map. Fuck you. Yeah, exactly. It's like, again... Please do not design a game in favor of ego gamers. Ego gamers are the death of fun. It is more important for them that the game isn't fun, but it makes them feel good, than if the game is fun and it's rewarding. That is the problem. If somebody says the response, if a mechanic makes a player feel bad, and your only response is get good without any logic to it, then you are the one who is retarded. That's it. Appreciate your accounts. Yeah, that's the way I see it. And Asmongold is your average PoE player. I think that you vastly overestimate the average PoE player. I'll be honest. Like, for the amount of time that I play the game, I'm trash. But if you want to look at the average player, I'm pretty good.